Well, it is now 7 p.m. on November 12th, 2024. We'd like to welcome everyone out to the City Council meeting. We'll start our meeting with an invocation by Councilmember Kim Rodello, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Brittany Bills.
Our dear, kind, gracious Heavenly Father, we're so very grateful to be gathered here today as council members, staff, mayor, and extremely grateful to be able to be residents in this city. We ask in this time to be able to provide us the direction that we need to take in order to make the decisions that are right for our area and our community. We say these things humbly and in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, can we believe it's been 1 week since the election? It just feels like it's been a lot longer time. So at this time in our meeting, we have set apart time for what's called unscheduled public appearances. So at this time, we'd like to invite anyone to come up. They'd like to address and discuss things with the council. If they'll just please state their name and keep their comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone who'd like to come up and address the council on anything? That there will be one public hearing later today on agenda item number 4A, but anything else, we'd like to invite you to come up. Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting of the unscheduled public appearances. I don't see our person here that we have for a presentation on the Highlands Farmers Market. Is there someone here that was going to present on the Highlands Farmers Market?
Would have been Heather.
Okay. We will now move on to our next item, which is item number 3A, which is approval of the meeting minutes for October 1st, 2024. I noticed there was some...
Somebody may be here for Heather.
Are you here for Heather?
I was here to be with Heather. So I did text her and let her know that I was here.
We'll wait on that just because we'd love to hear from Heather a little bit about how the farmers market went. So we will come back to item number 2A, but we are on item number 3A, which is approval of the meeting minutes. Doug, did you have some items?
I do have some amendments to that. I have 5.
Okay.
One, under the others present list, it includes Liz Hart, and that should be Liz Rice. 2, under item 2B, in Brian Braithwaite's report, he is reported as saying that current residents will not experience any sort of fee increase. I looked back on the video, and I would like to strike will not experience any sort of fee increase and replace it with will not pay this impact fee unless they buy a home.
Is that what you're stating was in the recording?
That was what was in the recording.
Okay.
Yeah. The third item is simply clarification that the draft minutes state that Councilmember Doug Courtney requested that expedited item 5B, annual fertilizer order, be moved to the consent agenda. I would like to add the text, there was no objection to this change immediately after, move to the consent agenda.
Okay.
Item 4, the last bullet item on item 4A looks like it was extraneous. That's the last bullet item and 3 sub items. It is a piece of the ordinance that was copied into the minutes, and I would like to strike that bullet point.
So just want to make sure you're striking the bullet point number 1.
That's an image?
That's in the image there on the, yes.
Okay.
And finally, there were 2 votes taken under item 4A. They are listed in the draft minutes as vote on the amended motion and vote on the original motion. I would like to change that to vote on the motion to amend and vote on the amended motion, which I think is an accurate description of what actually took place.
Any comments from any council members on those? Seeing none? You have?
I just have a question. I mean, I support those, and I'm glad Doug goes over everything with a fine-tooth comb. But Stephanie, on number 4, when you had this little piece of code that was in the minutes, can you explain? It's kind of a rebuttal. Why?
Why it was placed in there.
Yeah.
I think it was just added incorrectly. When you're going through those minutes and trying to capture what was said, what was presented at the meeting, sometimes that just got captured in that portion of the
Captured.
minutes.
So you didn't intentionally want
No.
it in there. Okay.
And so, so Stephanie, you agree with this should not be part of the
I
okay,
do.
I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that.
I wanted to make sure there too.
Okay, with
If
that,
no one has any other amendments, I move to adopt the October 1st, 2024 minutes with the proposed amendments.
October 1st, 2024. Okay.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Doug, second by Scott. We'll go ahead and if we have electronic voting, we'll move to electronic voting. Okay, that passes 5-0. We're now going to go back to item number 2A because I believe Heather is here with the Highlands Farmers Market. Heather, we'd love to have you come up and kind of give us a report on how the farmer market went.
Okay. Let's see. I made a list of points. Depends on what you guys are most interested in hearing about. Let's see. Okay. So for me, how it went is I loved that I could buy produce every week. We actually had produce before the downtown farmers market had any at their market this year. Because the first complaint in June is always, there's no food. And it's like, well, you got to give it a second to grow. So in June, we mostly sold microgreens because those are year-round and plant starts. But then once it picked up, we had some produce before some of the bigger markets. And halfway through, we met a grower who found us halfway through the season. He's just down the road in Lehigh, and he said next year he can have tomatoes on June 1st. So that's cool. But anyway, so in terms of the providing produce, I was kind of proud. We were tiny. For those of you guys who went, we were tiny. But we had, I made a list of all the produce we did have. Plant starts, tomatoes, cucumbers, okra, squash, mushrooms, microgreens, corn, melons, basil, including a rare Thai basil that my neighbor was thrilled to get, cherries, apricots, apples, pears, pluots, and then some amazing desserts. I don't know if you guys tried them. And we usually had at least one bread seller, and usually the bread would sell out before the end of the market. We were tiny, but we tried to keep the ratios pretty good. So you'd have enough craft booths to cover the cost of it existing, and then enough. We had a lot of like backyard growers. We had some teenage girls from Alpine and a few families, and that farm in Lehigh I mentioned. We didn't get Think Little Farm. I don't know if this is a small farm in Highland. One of our attendees introduced me to him like towards the end of the season, and he was like, no, I didn't know. But he's so excited for next year. And that's a Highland farm, and he's got a good variety. In terms of facilities, because that was kind of our deal with the city, is you guys provided facilities and we kind of tried to do everything else. We, meaning me. But with the park, I tried to pick up trash every single week, try and leave it nicer than we found it. We spent about half an hour to an hour picking up trash, wiping down tables, moving fallen branches, because with windy Highland, that was an issue every week, is fallen branches. We did have, it would often come up from either attendees or vendors that bathrooms were often an issue, like lack of soap or toilet paper. And so that's one thing that we'd run into, or they'd run down to the park down the street, and those bathrooms would be in a similar predicament. So that was a thing that came up quite often. The volleyball net was, when I saw one purchased, Then the market, out of the budget, I bought a volleyball. Someone walked away with it towards the end of the season, but the volleyball net, I think, got thrashed during the week of the fling because we came back the next week and it was down on the ground. But this is a silly little facility, but the tetherball pole, I purchased a tetherball to put on there, and it was in constant use, and it was shredding the tree right next to it. And the tetherball pole and the tree are not good neighbors, but until eventually the tree won. So anyway, if we could trim one limb, then we can get another tetherball back on there. But okay, that's facilities. We did also shift the booths around to not wear the grass in a predictable pattern. And whenever there were dead spots that were struggling, we just didn't have any booths over there to let that grass be. Let's see.
Did you have enough electrical outlets?
Yes. What we ended up having is we only ever had 1 or 2 booths that ever needed electrical. And so I could run a 100-foot extension cord from that utility building. That utility building has plenty of power. It's a matter of just bringing it over to where the people are. And then, so I would always start my corner of the market based on how far I could get the electrical over. Our biggest use of electrical was our live music. And for those of you guys who went, I think almost everybody went multiple times. We had some great musicians lined up. Mostly Erin Wilcox carried it, and she was phenomenal. And when I asked feedback from vendors, a lot of them said it was the first market they'd been to where there was live music among the vendors, and that it absolutely set the mood, and it was a nice hangout spot, and Erin could take any request under the sun and play it. She was amazing. But so our electrical was fine. Some of our food booths even ended up just using their own propane setup, so they didn't even need it. Let's see. Vendor feedback. I mean, some teenage girls said they loved the chance to make money. Our girls who did cinnamon rolls and cookies sold out almost every night. They were very good. Absolutely worth every dollar. A lot of the feedback from our youth vendors is their parents were really grateful that there was a very low-cost, easy way for their children to try something. And let's see. Getting to know fellow vendors, local customers, meeting new people. That was a recurring theme. When I asked people, okay, what benefit should I take back to City Council? I think every single comment mentioned community, which is an intangible, but it does affect tangibles because if people are hanging out in the city, their dollars are spent in the city. And I wish I had the survey ability to track how many dollars were spent in the community so I could tell you, here's how much sales tax you got. I was a one-man band, so I tried to cover all the bases I could. I did not get to that. I think that was the biggest thing. Every single person said the community, hanging out with the community. And that was part of my goal, was to create a third place in Highland, because we don't have a lot of third spaces. The first is where you live, second's where you work, and third is where you hang out. We have parks, but there's not always a reason to go to the parks. So to create a place where there's live music, something to stroll around and shop at, and a reason to hang out at the park was really cool to see. Financials, let's just say we broke even. So just basically broke even. My biggest cost was I signed up for the AF Chamber of Commerce, and then I was going to get into that Connections magazine and take out a 3rd-page ad, but they never returned phone calls or emails, and it was really frustrating. The AF Chamber of Commerce. Never.
The AF Chamber never returned your call.
I did an in-person meeting, and then I sent emails and voicemails, and the promises made in the in-person meeting were never followed through on. So, and then later I heard from other people that I probably should have gone with Northern Utah. Anyway, a different Northern Utah Valley one. But
Well noted. Thank you.
So
Very well.
next time I would not pay for that chamber fee, and But as I
Council,
was,
that will be coming up as a discussion item, just so you're aware. Heads out to the chambers. Be aware of that.
let's see. Well, I was waiting to hear back because I was supposed to take an ad out in that magazine that was going to go to like 20,000 households or something. I kind of rolled the dice and sent a mailer I used the Every Door mailer to all of Highland, which is so expensive, but Canyon Copy gave me a great discount. And so that was like $1,700. I wouldn't do that next year because we were starting so late in the summer that I was like, I need to fill out vendors and get the word out. So I kind of rolled the dice on that expense. And so that's why we came out just about even. I wouldn't need to do that next year. We also, I was told that we couldn't be in the city newsletter. And then halfway through the summer, Aaron was like, no, that's not true. You could be in the city newsletter. So we were not in June. We were in July. We were not in August. And then I followed up, and then we were in September. So I think if I could swap that $1,700 for just being in the city newsletter by default, then that would be awesome. And I would also just put up more signs around the city with better boldface type. Yeah.
So how many booths did you have? I attended a couple of times. It started out and it kind of shrank.
Yeah.
So how many booths would you have, let's say, in June, then July?
So June, I was around 20, a little over 20, a little under 20, around the 20 booth mark. July was mid-teens. Towards when we were in end of September after school started, the lowest we got to was 11. And I was feeling like, oh, man. When I got onto monthly phone calls with other market managers around the state, for some of them, 10 was the biggest they ever got to. And so, now those were kind of rural towns, but kind of Highland likes being less dense. So they're not quite our comparable peer, but kind of as a first year in a less dense place. So I was like, okay, 11 as my lowest is okay if 10 was their biggest. But I think it absolutely has the potential to grow because this was just a first year. And with costs coming down next year by at least $2,000, then, and the ability, now more vendors know about us. We've built some relationships. We've got a food truck who loved coming. Los Tapia Kitchen loved coming. I think it absolutely has the chance to grow. When I got the request to come here, I was like, oh man, I thought I had a few more months to think about how to approach next year. But, and I know this is just a presentation, not an action item. I reached out to, one of the ideas we threw out, I think Aaron threw out last year, was reaching out to Good for Life markets and see if they worked with you guys and then they had a local market manager so we could get rid of some of those overhead costs that they already have covered, more efficient, like the web hosting or the, like transaction fees and stuff like that all got eaten up. So I reached out to Denise and she was enthusiastic about coming. And she had, between the two kind of regional companies that contract with cities, there's the one who does Orem, Draper, and a few others, and she does Saratoga, Harriman, Taylorsville, and West Jordan, I think. From my vendors, I heard many positive things about her. So I invited her to come and to bring a brag sheet if you were interested in listening to her.
To bring what type of sheet?
A brag sheet or an elevator pitch. She's about to get an award for Business of the Year from her Chamber of Commerce. But anyway, that's what I was thinking going forward, is if we tap into an organization that's kind of a well-oiled machine, we can cover some of those costs. And she's got a team that can grow it. Because I think it can grow. I just can't do it by myself. There's just the marketing, the vendor relations, it's a lot, which I knew. But I can't do more. So I did as best as I could, and that's where we got. But I see potential for it to grow. Do you have any questions?
Heather, congratulations. Like you said, your tenacity got it going. You stuck with it.
I could start it.
And that's part of the, that is like starting a business. It's the hard part is that starting and going through that learning. So congratulations. I mean, as I went there, you had vendors, you had people who were showing up, that like you said, that first year is always that hard, and then you learn about how to start to do.
And there are
things.
so many regulatory bodies because it's like you've got the homemade food and the UDAF, and you've got all these regulations, and you got to keep all of it straight.
So, Council, is there any questions you'd like to ask Heather?
How much interest is there for next year?
I mean, from vendors, a lot. I think the interest is there to continue. Obviously, I had a selection bias on feedback I got from people. Attendees would pull me aside and say, "Thank you so much. Our community needed this." And they'd give me 10 ideas of what to do, like all these suggestions. I'm like, yes, I'm one person, but yes, I love the suggestions. So I think there's interest for it to grow. I also think, Alpine, I heard from some of my vendors that Alpine got a little jealous, and now they're going to try and start one. They had tried the year before we did, and it didn't go anywhere because they're very small and they're tucked in a corner. But Highland makes sense because we're in the middle of Alpine, Cedar Hills, AF, and Lehigh, and none of those cities currently have markets. So a lot of our vendors were from down the road in American Fork, Lehigh. We had families coming from Alpine. So Highland makes sense. It's the heart of it.
So you said you had a lot of suggestions for other types of vendors and things. What would you try to do next year?
What would I do next year? I think I could go booking more vendors. I was afraid to oversell vendors and then have not enough public to support it because my client is the vendors and then their client is the public. So I would secure more vendors because I think the public would show up for it. And I would get permission from you guys to put up more signs around the city because I just had the 2 at the park, but I think, the 3-way stop above, like up in my neighborhood where everyone goes through that. I think there are places where I would put more signs because that's much cheaper than the mailer, and you pay it once and then the sign's up through the season and instead of a flyer that goes into the trash. So I would do more signs. Somebody wanted to do a car boot sale. We're like, I can't coordinate that.
They want to do a what?
A car boot sale. I was like, that's a delightful idea. It's a different animal. I can't.
What's a car boot sale?
Car boot sale? It's like everybody brings their secondhand items in their car boot. It's British car boot. Your trunk.
Gotcha.
It's big in Europe. Yes. Where everyone drives up and sells out of the back of their car.
It's like a trunk or treat, but the opposite.
Yes, but you pay for
We're getting rid of stuff.
I thought it was super well done. It was so fun, and I was just amazed that you were there setting up every week. You were there cleaning up and taking down. Doug shared his lemonade and cinnamon roll with me. Rob
That
shared his
lemonade
sandwich.
was so
it was all
good.
good.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And the city was able to put up a booth one week, but you guys are always welcome for any initiative to put up a booth. And
So Rob, I have a question for you. As we talk about putting up more signs, I know we have our Arts Council, and then they have groups amongst that Arts Council that we've allowed them to go put signs up in certain strategic areas of the city because they're part of the Arts Council. Is that something as we look at the farmers market that also would have that availability to be able to do some signage since it's something that supports the community and things of that nature?
Yes, I was pulling up the code to find the exact language of it, but generally we have an exception because we have the normal rule of you can't put
Correct.
signs in public spaces. The exception is for community events that the city supports because we are partnering with Heather. This is when we could allow signs to be put up. Like the Arts Council, where we have them put up signs. We, make sure we're in.
Because you have hit. I think if you had, I don't think a lot of the residents, really knew what was going on.
Yeah.
I think that was if they knew there was farmers market and you had them strategic in the area, saying, hey, it's on Thursdays, at here at the Heritage Park. I think you'd have more that way.
Absolutely.
And trying to help support. I do think we could do better to help support you. I think there's some support that. Maybe if we come and support you a little bit better, it also will help get your vendors need to have people there buying because if they're not profitable, they don't want to come back.
Yes.
So those 20 vendors that went down to 11, that they all seem
department did come, and so did the Department of Ag 2 times.
So I think that's great. I just wonder if we did get any sales tax.
We would have gotten some.
You'd have gotten some.
So
I don't know.
David, you're saying yes, we did receive some?
I haven't looked at the detailed reports yet, but I'm sure that we did get some. It's unknown if all of the vendors went through the process correctly, but
Yes.
hopefully they did. And my understanding is that food trucks are required to also report the location that they are selling.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay.
So how does that work, Dave? So they report to the state, and then the state comes back and says, this was sales tax.
That was generated.
Yeah,
generated
they fill
by-"
out a report just like any other business that has a location code that's tied to Highland. And so the distribution is done just like any other business, where half of that will come to us directly. The other half gets put into a pool with the statewide pool, and gets distributed based on population.
Is that done through a special code or the zip code that we share with them?
It's a special state tax commission code that the city's given.
Okay.
So Heather, first thing you talked about was facilities. You were at the Heritage Park. Did that park seem to work well? It has trees in that versus we have, our new park, we actually have special power for
Yeah, you've got
vendors.
power for it.
We have a different setup there where we've put in different power along the walkway. We have for food trucks, we actually have, so they don't have to have their generator running. We've actually put power out in that parking lot. Not saying we actually move it there because we can see our car show, for instance, that we had the fling. We got praise for that, having them there at the Heritage Park because they loved having the trees and that shade. We recognize that for that type of event, they would much rather almost have that. And I guess unless we open up the big parking lot. But we have our new park that has some power things. As you look at the facilities, would you say Heritage fit your situation better? Or would it be better, maybe to consider at our new park? I mean, actually, the new park has a lot more movement of individuals around it.
Yeah.
That can change. It doesn't have as much shade.
So I did look through, I've taken my child to the new park and it's great. I haven't seen, is there a lot of green space or is it mostly facilities? Because I see projects happening and I don't know if green space is getting filled
The whole backside
in.
will almost all be grass.
Oh, okay.
So we have soccer fields, baseball diamond. It's really going to open up and have a lot more grass there.
Okay. So I think green space is obviously essential. That's where you set up. The trees made people stick around and buy because I noticed, to start out, I brought yard games like cornhole and can jam and things to try and get people to hang out. And it's just so blazing hot that hardly anyone touches it because it's just so hot. And no one only little children played in the sand, but mostly the sand is lava. And but the trees bring the temperature down so that if you've got tree and then vendor canopy, it was actually quite decent. As long as you have a lemonade, then you're fine.
And you did have lemonade.
Yes,
You had a
those
couple
are
drinks.
really good.
Okay, anything else, Council?
Just as big a thank you as I can muster.
thanks.
Thank you so much. I think it's brought an element to Highland that's overdue, and I think it'll grow.
I think it will
I just
too.
applaud all the work you've done. It's recognized and appreciated.
Yeah, we loved it. We try to go there every week, so great job. Hopefully we can keep it going, keep growing it. Yeah, and if you want to look at keeping it there at that location or new park, we can assess and see,
Yeah.
which is a better location. But I'm excited for next year, and we can work on advertising better with the city as well.
Okay, that would be great with the social media and the newsletter. That would be
I
awesome.
think there's a partnership the city can help out a little bit more and something. We were new to this too. Does that make sense? As you were
Yes.
starting, we're trying to figure out how to work that. And I think that's where that second year can kind of help. Okay, now I think we have understanding what's going on and understand where we maybe need to step up a little bit to help there a little better and something. But Heather, I want congratulations.
Thanks.
You did a good job. And I had good comments coming back from residents, so that was a benefit. I didn't have any negative. Does that make sense? So that's the other positive. So.
Moving forward for next year, I had something come up in the past month or so where I'm probably going to be out of the country next summer for a bit. And so that's why I reached out to Denise, because I'm trying to wrap my brain around how I could do both. And it's a bit of a non-negotiable thing that wasn't supposed to happen. But anyway, so looking forward, my personal recommendation is connecting with Good for Life markets. And then they would hire a local manager. But
That's something I think we'd entertain.
okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Okay, let's move on to our. Yeah, go ahead. We'd like.
I just did a little, so I run market.
If you'll please give
already.
your name and everything, just so we can
Yep.
get on the record.
What's that?
If
my
you'll
name?
give us your full name, just so we get on the record.
Yep, Denise Christiansen with Good for Life Markets. So, yeah, I have talked to Heather. We talked about asking her because I would need a local manager on site. But I would be interested, and I told Heather,
Thank you.
I need you. Thank you for starting the market and realizing that you might not be able to continue. I would still need you. So she said, as long as
Denise? Denise?
Yeah.
Everything that you're saying right now is not being captured on our audio. Will you mind stepping back to the
So
microphone
she just
when
hand
you
out the
finish?
papers. Then if you'll
Thank
go back
you.
through and kind of just share, so we have people online that like to either watch or they watch after. So, and then we do have our city administrator that is not present with us. It's also online. So.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. So yeah, Heather reached out to me. I told her I would need her anyway next year in the summer, so she wouldn't go away necessarily, but I would be able to help keep the market going. I do markets in 4 other cities, and that is just, I started in 2021 out of the need of just wanting a farmer's market in my own city because I was traveling. I was a vendor at the time doing markets all the way from Springville to Bountiful. And I thought, why don't we have one right here in Harriman? This is silly. So I started the one in Harriman. They were so thrilled to do that. And then just the word spread. West Valley said, who does your market, Harriman? And then Saratoga Springs said, who does your market, Harriman? And so anyway, that's how I got my start. I love it. I love what I do. And I told Heather, I will still need you. We still need you there because you have the history. You know the vendors, you know the customers. And so, but I would be able to give her the opportunity to go away when she needed to in the summer. Because that's how I do. I have market managers in each city. We also do like city, like Harriman Town Days, and the Western Stampede in West Jordan is one of our vendor markets that we do as well. But it was just out of a need to bring agriculture and small business. I put on the very top, like, promoting your business is our business, and I take that to heart. Last week, I think Heather mentioned it, we did get awarded through the Mountain West Chamber of Commerce as Small Business of the Year, which is like such a thrill to me and so humbling that we would be at this point. Like, really? No way. But I have a small team that works with me. My daughter-in-law lives right in American Fork, and she does all of my social media, all of my advertising, all of our anything digital. She's a graphic artist in college as a graphic artist, but she's right here, and so she's part of our team. And then my family comes and works at the markets or sets up or whatever. But in looking at what Heather does, it's the very same. The only thing that we could add, I think, or not the only thing, but I think what we could add is our presence in the marketplace. I sit on the leadership team for the Utah Farmers Market Network. And so we're very well connected. Good for Life Markets is very well connected with the Utah Farmers Market Network. And then also we would bring SNAP and Double Up, which is the food incentive programs through the state. And I noticed on the posters out front that there was a little bit of concern, not a big concern. We realize that being where Highland is and what Highland is, but there might be some food insecurity that people want, and in the surrounding communities especially, that people want the opportunity to use their food stamps at the farmer's market. And that's a long, arduous process to get through and to be approved as a market that will take food stamps. But we did, $32,000 worth of senior vouchers this year, which supported the senior community in getting fresh fruits and vegetables, the low-income senior community throughout our markets this year. So we're a big part of that food insecurity.
So a question I'd have, we talk about local farmers, local vendors, as you start looking, are you going to start getting those bigger vendors that are coming in, or will it still be more local vendors? What have you experienced at your markets?
Yeah, so one of my philosophies is that our local vendors come first. So when I'm choosing vendors, if I've got equal, they both sell sourdough bread, and one is from Highland and one is from West Jordan, I will always go with that city where the market is located first. Always, always, always. It doesn't matter when the applications came in. It is absolutely the local city first. And my vendors know. I have over 1,000 vendors to pick from that follow us on social media. And so we so we have a lot to choose from. And they're pretty happy with us. I mean, they wouldn't keep coming, I guess. We've got honey farmers and bread people and salsa people that have been with us since day one, that have watched us grow and take a small market. My markets we had about 20 in Taylorsville this year. So a small market there, where our biggest market, Harriman, we just closed our 4th season, and we averaged between 50 and 60 vendors. But we started at 20. We did the same thing. And I'm just in the process right now, because we just closed, of putting together those financial reports and the tax reports and those kind of things for the city, so you can see what a benefit it does for you.
So is yours a 501(c)(3), or are you for profit, or are you a charitable organization?
I'm an LLC,
Okay.
and a for-profit, and I don't make much per hour because it's a lot of work behind the scenes, but if you count it that way. But I still love what I do, and we have quite a connection in the marketplace, so it's pretty easy to get the word out that, hey, this market is starting. And so we have lots of followers, Instagram, Facebook, so that it's a little bit easier to spread the word. We have a website, and those connections. So.
On the business model
Yeah.
side of it, you've got Heather, who's bringing in, let's say, 20.
Mm-hmm.
You come in, what is the business model? You bring in additional that you're funded from, or how do you work? How are you? What do you get out of this financially?
Oh,
Where do
okay.
you get the money from?
Yeah, so I think what Heather and I have discussed is that she might not be in a position to run the market next year in Highland, but she has said, we've just heard such good things about Good for Life, that it would be really good if you could share your information with the council. Let that be your decision, or your city attorney's decision about who you want to run your market, but she would still like to be the market manager and be here on a weekly basis,
would work
except
that out.
when
We
she
don't
can't.
need to worry about that.
No, you don't need to worry about that. Yeah, not at all. The other thing that's, I think, super important, that yes, you'll see Good for Life markets on advertising, that kind of thing, but most people think that it's a city event. It's really funny when people come to the farmers markets where I currently run markets, they think it's the city putting it on. They don't realize that I'm contracted with the city. The city donates the space. I bring in the vendors. There's absolutely no exchange of money between me and the cities, and I simply get my money from the vendors. So if I'm not good, no vendors are going to come, right? And so then I don't get paid. But the most customers coming to the market think it is a city-sponsored and a city-run event. And that's the way we want it, right? We don't necessarily want the public to feel like there's this other thing over here in our city. Just don't want it. So
Any other questions?
yeah, that's all.
Thank you. I'll tell you, maybe 15, 20 years ago, my kids would come and do like a little snow cone. So I remember having to sign up for events. And there was nothing more frustrating coming to Highland. And I remember they'd open the events at 7 a.m. I mean, I remember this day, and there was a line out, and we had 1 or 2 vendors come in, and they took everything, and they weren't even from Highland, and they took away. And I'm going, well, hold it. And so I actually offered the next year to be over the vendors, and I said, if they're a Highland resident, we're going to they have a one day before that they get to register before all the other vendors.
Absolutely.
So we got to get it was more localized.
That's
that
wonderful.
we were trying to support our, and it worked out good. We got, you had those vendors come in, but then you had the others that kind of come there. So, I mean, I kind of get what you're trying to do. I've been a lot of, all of us have been a lot of fairs and events.
Yeah.
Things that way. But,
Yeah.
Heather's done, so it's a very similar setup was what you're saying. You've done with other
exactly.
cities where we worked with Heather. She kind of was the one with the manpower and things that way.
That's right.
You've done that there with Harriman.
Yeah. Harriman, Taylorsville contacted me directly last winter. We started their market, and then Saratoga Springs, same thing. It's exactly the same thing. But
So are you?
I just want to assure
are you. In
you,
Saratoga Springs then? Are you doing?
I live in Harriman,
I know, but you said Saratoga.
Saratoga Springs. We did
Okay,
the
it's not
farmers
on your
market in
list, but
Saratoga.
You're doing one out in Saratoga then?
Yeah.
Okay.
We did Saratoga.
Sounds good.
So
Okay, thank
yeah.
you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay. We'll now move on to our first action item, which is action item number 4A. This will be a public hearing. It's amendment to our PD zone to remove commercial requirements. We have our city attorney / planning zoning administrator, Rob Patterson, will walk us through this.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So, by way of background, as I'm sure you can recall, we are required by the state to adopt a certain number of moderate income housing strategies. We're supposed to select at least 3. After some discussion at the beginning of last year, we actually had submitted some earlier that the state kind of rejected, so we cleaned it up, went through it again. So in January, the commission recommended 3 different strategies. Ultimately, the council picked 2 strategies recommended by the commission, and a third one, which is the one we're talking about tonight, the rezoning for higher density near commercial and mixed-use zones. As part of the state mandate, the cities were also required to adopt benchmarks and kind of goals to implement these strategies. So on the next slide, that that strategy F is the first bullet point, is the strategy. The zone or rezone for higher density or moderate income residential development in commercial or mixed use zones near major transit investment corridors, commercial centers, or employment centers. And then the implementation strategies adopted by this council last year include permitting the rest of Ridgeview, looking at updating and maybe doing some rezoning in the future for different things. But that second bullet point there was in 2024 to remove the requirement to include a commercial aspect in planned development PD districts. So that's what this proposal is. So by way of background, planned developments are, no, you're good. These are property-specific master plan developments, so we're all familiar with them. It's our Sky Estates, it's our Ridgeview. It's where they came in with a development concept plan. There's negotiation between the council and the developer. We set limits on density. They usually got some kind of residential density bonus as part of the PD, but in exchange, they had to give certain things to the city or agree to certain conditions that maybe they otherwise would not have, including providing commercial aspects. The most recent one we had Wild Rose, so down across from the high school. The council allowed for a rezone to allow for denser residential units. They got 6 kind of smaller lots, and then they have 1 commercial piece right next to the highway there. The other big one, obviously Ridgeview, where they have the commercial, where they have the kind of medical place that hasn't been developed, and then the Costa Vida Arby's area down there. Sky Estates has a commercial component off of Highland Boulevard. It's the empty lot that's right up there that hasn't been developed since it went in 10 years ago. And then 10700 over here, they have the residential going in, but there are 2 reserved pads for future commercial. So this would remove the requirement to have commercial as part of it. Ultimately, though, all PDs are subject to the council's discretion. You don't ever have to approve a PD, and the terms of any PD are fully up to the council to decide. And any change we make to the code only applies going forward. Any current PD, so 10700, Ridgeview, Sky Estates, they'd have to come and ask the council to essentially rezone their property to change anything through the major amendment process. Again, the council would not have to grant any of it. That's fully discretionary. The other change is currently it says that PDs can be only located in the mixed use category in our general plan land use map. So actually, let's go forward a couple because I want to hit that. So here's our current land map. Technically, Sky Estates isn't in the mixed use zone just because we haven't updated our land use map since 2012. But all of that orange area, that's our mixed use category, and that reflects all of our PDs. So you see Wild Rose, Ridgeview, and then the town center, 10700 PDs. So on the next slide is what was proposed initially to Planning Commission. It clarifies that we can do a mix of residential, non-residential, as well as residential-only developments. I proposed removing the situation, talking about we can't just do it just for relaxation of standards, because if we do residential only, it will de facto be a relaxation of our normal residential type standards. And then I proposed changing it to removing that mixed-use land use category. One, because if we're going to allow residential only, it doesn't make sense to put those in mixed use because they're not a mixed use, they're residential only. And then the big change is that last 1A, where we say a PD has to have a mixed use, meaning either commercial and residential, or a mixing of housing types for residential. The Planning Commission reviewed this a couple weeks ago, October 22nd. We had one resident come and speak regarding this matter, objecting to the removal of commercial aspects from PDs. The Commission reviewed that, had a good discussion about this, and ultimately voted to approve the amendment, but to change the language so commercial was no longer required, but would still be an expectation of all new PD districts, unless they can justify to the council's satisfaction that it was not necessary for that PD. So I proposed language to that effect that would still kind of set the expectation that commercial would still be included with any new PD, and the council would have to agree that commercial shouldn't be included in order to exclude that. Just kind of for information purposes, if the council doesn't do this, this is written, when we adopted this goal, it was written as a mandatory thing, that the council will remove this. Couldn't quite find why it was written that way. A lot of our other goals are more flexible in how we approach them. This one was written kind of just, we will remove it. I wonder, it seemed like the discussion, it was thought of maybe this wouldn't be a big deal, but nothing too specific. But on the next slide.
So as you bring that up, if we decide not to, do we, okay.
That's what I'm talking about here. I'm going to say this is all very potential, and I'm going to give some maybe scary numbers, but I want to make it clear that I've not seen this go into effect yet, meaning penalties haven't been assessed to a city that I'm aware of for not meeting their objectives. But every year we have to do an annual report. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I think you got an email, maybe it was just to the mayor, but saying that our moderate income housing report had been submitted and had been accepted by the state. We have to give an update on all of our goals and what we've done to implement them and how many new ADUs we have and how many building permits we have and all of that. So we do that annually. And so next year we'll have to report on what we accomplished in 2024 related to our goals, which will relate to this benchmark. And I'll report whether we accomplished it or not. There is a chance, if you go on to the next slide, because they do ask about all of these things, that they could say our report is deficient if we don't show that we've complied with it. And there are penalties. The biggest one is a $500 per day fine. Again, I've never seen that happen. I'm saying this is very potential. I don't know that this would actually happen if the city does not do this. I'm just raising the issue as a potentiality out there. Other options we have, if the council's not wanting to say go this direction, we could try to amend our general plan and amend the moderate income housing element. However, this original one that we did in 2023, we submitted to the state and got approved. We'd have to do a similar process. We'd have to take it to Planning Commission, come back to council, amend the general plan, submit it to the state, and see if they approve it going forward. If the council gives direction, staff will certainly start that process. We just have not, because we're just following on the plan that's been implemented. Going forward, we could also address this. We will address it as part of our general plan update. We could do some tweaks as part of that process as well. But happy to answer any questions. Staff's recommendation is to adopt the proposed amendments as recommended by the Planning Commission, but we're open to helping out however we can.
So, Mayor, if you don't mind, I do have a question. So down in the exhibits in 3-510, establishment of a PD district, in red, in item A, you go on and say, or a mix of residential housing types, including moderate income housing, single-family and multi-family housing and senior housing uses. In the resource material, you define multifamily housing as not townhomes or twin homes. What is your definition of multifamily housing? It's up in the resource material. It's in parentheses. As a twin homes and townhomes seem to be a modification of single-family home housing.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find my reference for that. Because I would define multifamily housing as including townhomes and twin homes.
You know, I was confused because it's up in here in parentheses, and maybe I'm just reading it wrong. I just showed it to Brittany because we were talking about.
You said, Scott, it was three. Just so I can follow you. Exactly where's that?
So yeah, it's up on page 16 of 76. It says, and in some cases, we're permitted to allow multi-family housing in addition to denser single-family townhomes, twin homes. Is that just the way it's written?
That's just the way it's written. I meant to say you allowed multifamily housing, and I should have put the parenthetical there, saying townhomes, twin homes, in addition to denser single-family homes, which would be your like carriage lots that are like a 6,000 square foot lot or.
See, the parentheses made me.
I put it in the wrong place. You're correct. That is confusing how I wrote
because
that.
Multifamily housing, in my mind, always means apartment buildings, and there's been some kind of, I don't know, people haven't wanted to do that in Highland.
I mean, I guess a developer could propose that type. When I was thinking of what was feasible that the council might actually approve would be something like Ridgeview, where you might have a cluster of 6 townhomes attached, which is multifamily housing because it's one building with multifamily. I apologize for writing.
No, that's
that
okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I was reading that and I got kind of confused.
Nope, that's a good clarification.
So, do you mind if I say a little more, Mayor? Okay. So I was the resident that came to Planning Commission, and I don't know. I said a lot. It probably wasn't appropriate for me necessarily to be there since I can vote on the council, but I was on the council when we came up with the concept of the PD zone. And we felt pretty strongly that there needed to be a little fraction of these zones have some commercial, especially if they were on a main highway. If the thing is I'm afraid that if we just say it's not kind of part of the code, that there'll be no interest really in many cases to do any sort of commercial. And I think in a small city like we have with kind of a small commercial base, yet 28.54% of our general fund budget is generated from sales tax. And our direct sales tax is only 25% of what we actually count as our sales tax. I just think it's sad to eliminate the opportunity to have a few little commercial areas on the main highway. So if this was in effect before Ridgeview, I bet we wouldn't have Costa Vida. That's got to be generating some sales tax for the city because I've never driven by there where there isn't a lineup. And we wouldn't have Arby's and some of these other kind of commercial entities. And because I have friends that are developers, I have patients that are developers, I'm a capitalist, but I just think nowadays everybody's convinced themselves that everybody buys everything on the internet, so there's no need for commercial. And I kind of disagree with that. So in Sky Estates, there is that little piece of property up there that's never been developed as commercial, but as D.R. Horton continues to build East Lehigh, and you know what I feel about that, I think it should have been in Highland. And then as the Blue Bison people have construct their area, and as that area of the city grows, that seems like a natural spot for a convenience store or a gas station or electrical. Yeah, it just is kind of a classic place. And now that we allowed some more alcohol licenses, it seems like 10700 you could get a restaurant in there. I would hopefully, So I just kind of hate to give up our commercial when we badly need it, and so I just have kind of frustrations with the state legislature because I understand the need for housing, and I understand the need for affordable housing, but nothing that's getting built in Highlands really affordable, even this high density stuff. And so I think sometimes we kind of, I don't know, kind of fool ourselves trying to meet these mandates and things when they're really not realistic, because is there affordable housing up in Ridgeview? I don't think so. Even the townhomes that are leased are very expensive, and they're 2,000 square feet. And I don't know. I think it's sad that the state legislatures come down and making rules that we have to accept and that we have to give up our commercial, which is part of our big tax base. But I may be the only one that thinks that way. But I don't know. I just have a hard time giving up any options for commercial on these mixed use areas and just have a lot of high density stuff. So that's kind of where I'm from.
Maybe to kind of give it, we ought to, for me, I want to look at the 4 areas which we've done as PD and say, how would that apply if we made a change? Scott, you brought up Ridgeview. I remember when Ridgeview came in, they had in their plan that if after 5 or 8 years, if they had, that they could convert that commercial into residential. I think it was within 5 years. And as the council, we caught that coming in, and we had to stop it, saying, no, we wanted to have commercial. If I had to go back again, I wish there was more commercial over in that area. I think it's a little shy over in that Ridgeview area. I think we're a little shy that we allowed them to scrunch it down a little too much. So I'm going, okay, Ridgeview, I think commercial has benefited. The reason we have the PD, the reason why I think the developers come and try to push on our PD, it's the only zone in the city that allows for more of a mixed use type of product. They can't do a mixed use in the city unless it's a PD. And so, I mean, maybe our error is that we've only got that one zone that they can do it with. But so if we go look, okay, we got up on our map, we have Sky Estates. I always thought it was interesting that there was one commercial pad there up in Sky Estates, and that's why they became a PD. And Scott, you're probably correct.
If I had the money, I would develop that.
Here you are, you're 10 to 15 years ago, you're thinking that was a crazy idea to put a commercial pad up there along our Highland Boulevard. As Scott's brought up, well, we have now a major development coming up there by Texas Instruments up in that corner. You've got some other things. That probably would be a successful restaurant. And I have actually had
a gas station.
I've had a business approach me about, do they think that this type of business would work there? So there has been some looking at that spot. That, to me, out of all of them, I'm going, okay, that Sky Estates doesn't maybe fit with what you're trying to do, PD. But now as we go down here, if we changed it 10700, we have to decide as a council that they would be one. They have not finished developing. They could come in and say, hey, you changed your PD zone. I would like now not to have commercial. So that's going to be something as we look at changing, that could be a development that could be changed and mixed it. Wild Rose, that's on our North County Boulevard. They were required to have a commercial pad out front, and then they put housing in back. To me, it would have just been housing, but we've kind of held out for the commercial. That's going to end up being, we have an application for a veterans clinic to come in, not veterans, what do I call it? It's a veterinarian.
A veterinarian clinic.
I'm sorry, veterinarian clinic.
Little different. Same diff.
There's a big difference. But a veterinarian clinic to come in there. So we are getting, now it's not maybe the commercial use that at one time I know that Cub Bop had actually looked at that spot and they went down a little further as Cedar Hills opened up their commercial, but we have a veterinarian clinic. Then once again, we got Ridgeview. So here's our 4 areas. Would we want to give up as we look at changing our PD zone? Is there stuff that we see that we would have, if they came in, that we would not want it to be commercial? I think that's, as we look at it, and as we look at going forward, I can see the Longhorn property, the only way they're going to come in zone, they either can come as a master development agreement. Am I thinking right? They could do a master development agreement, or they're going to come in as a PD zone to try to get higher density. And we're saying, hey, you're part of that, you're going to have commercial. Or do we want to say, no, we'd rather, other than that, I don't know if there's a lot of other parcels actually, we do have south area, which is going to be south of Ridgeview, which is still on Highland. We can see down here in that corner. That area has not been developed. How much is that's public? Was that a public comment meeting last week, Scott? Your board meeting, was it public?
Well, it was public.
Okay. There could be some use down there as a commercial user.
Oh, yes, there could be.
If it was public, Scott, you could talk. But
it was a public.
There is a user that is looking to possibly do commercial out front. This is south of, it would be the Murdoch Canal there. Highland has about 25 acres that's currently in the city.
We actually have, I think we figured it out, Rob and I, there's over 40 acres
Is it
in
40
that
acres?
section.
So 40 acres
Yeah.
south of the Murdoch Canal there is in Highland. That could be the next, so that's probably your two big mixed use areas. Now maybe you have, I don't know of anything else. Rob, is there anything else you see where it could have, where this zone would apply would be the 10700 here and Longhorn. Is there, I guess maybe there's some stuff on North County Boulevard or up Highland Boulevard?
It could be proposed. So thinking of kind of different areas where it might go. The only other area I could think is, so Longhorn's one, but we actually had a meeting with the Pattersons today, getting their feedback for the general plan, and they don't want to do all residential. They want to have some commercial aspect, so they wouldn't request it, at least as they've currently stated it. The other area that's kind of asked for it is that annexation area, the Perry Homes.
Up in that area.
They want
Beacon
they
Hills.
want mixed use with no commercial.
They want a mixed use with no commercial.
So
They're
they
the
would
only
be
ones I'm aware of who would propose a PD without a commercial component to it. And
So they're using the PD zone to try to get density. So they're using the zoning again because we have our R140, R120, R130, and this is the other zone they're looking at. So they're trying to push the PD in up there to get their density down.
I just want to be clear that I understand this right, because I believe what we're saying here is we want to take away the requirement that it be commercial be included, which means basically it's tying our hands. We can't do it any other way. If we pass this, it eliminates the required part, but it still gives us the option on any given development to say we want commercial there. We still, as a council, have that option. We just don't have it in the code where we don't have any flexibility. So we're just giving ourselves some flexibility if there is, maybe there's no circumstance where we feel like no commercial, but if there is, it doesn't tie our hands to that commercial.
It doesn't tie our hands, but I think it gives developers an expectation that there's an option where there isn't now.
It doesn't give that requirement. So I guess that's the word is like.
So the problem is if it's not required, oftentimes it won't happen. That's my concern.
Now let's look at
Yeah.
So now in our general plan, if we keep let's look at this. I call it Area 52 or up there. Your Area 52 up in the Beacon Hills area where they might be wanting to use a PD. Currently, that is zoned R140. That still has to come through legislative action. If we keep everything in the city, this is in our general plan. This is how important the general plan is going to be. If we don't go and specify, like down here in the Ridgeview area, that was specified as a mixed-use area in the general plan.
Right.
So that would be where they'd have the assumption to come apply the PD zone. But if it's not applied there, they've got to come through a zone change, such as Patterson. They've got to come through a zoning change. And so we can then say, no, we're not interested in doing a PD there with that, or we'd like to have commercial part of that, or however we'd like to. I'm just saying what Ron's bringing up, as long as we do our general plan correct and our land use maps. Am I thinking right, Rob?
Yes, the other area I could think of, not that I've heard any discussion whatsoever, but we have the Bueller property right in the heart of the city. I don't know if they'll ever propose doing anything or annexing into the city. But if they were, say, a generation or two down, decided to come in and they wanted to do something different, it maybe wouldn't make sense to have commercial in that area because that's not the city's commercial base. And we've had a preference in our general plan to make our kind of commercial bases centralized. So to Ron's point, it does allow a little more flexibility to not have it. But on the other hand, like Scott says, it does set an expectation for developers coming in what they are and are not expected to provide with any PD.
Let me just make a little comment. The mayor brought it up on Ridgeview, but in the original, and this is the ironic thing about the whole thing, in the original plan for the 112 acres between Lone Peak and the canal for Ridgeview, the state plan, the master plan they came up with in 2013 that passed the state legislature, had a lot more commercial in there than what the Boyer group has pushed for. In fact, as you said, Mayor, they wanted an out to eliminate more, but because most of they make their money off housing. And then there's, of course, we have our issue with Sunday closing and some of the other things, the alcohol thing, not so much anymore. But I don't know. I just hate to give up our commercial base because in the planning commission, they got really fixated on the $500 fine, which has never been implemented. It could well be, but you have to stop and say, but if we give up a lot of our commercial options, we might lose $500 a day in sales tax. So I think you have to kind of balance it out. I don't know. So I don't know what the best answer is. I just am really opposed to giving up commercial that we need so badly.
This is a public hearing, so we do need to hold
Yeah.
a public hearing at some time on this. Would you guys like to, should we hold our public hearing and then we'll come back to the council? Is that okay? So at this time, we'd like to open up the public hearing on item number 4A, which is amendments to the PD zone to remove the commercial requirements. So public hearing is now open.
Wanting to get the state off our backs and out of our business, and I think our focus was on preserving that element of commercial, especially within PD districts, while also satisfying the mandate of the state. And part of the discussion was kind of weighing the two. Okay, get the state off our backs, or do we not? And I think Ron put it well a couple minutes ago. At the end of the day, at least me personally, this removes the mandate on paper, but with rewording it and also including the same idea in the general plan, we can still establish the city's expectation that PDs include commercial. And at the end of the day, I still don't see how it changes. Either it's mandated in the code or mandated by city council. And I can't imagine a council that would ever be very relaxed on that. I think one issue that we during the alcohol debate that we all kind of came together on was, at least we're coming together on it now, is how important commercial is to the city and the businesses that generate the revenue within the city limits. And I think that the language that is part of the new wording of the code, establishing the city's expectation for commercial, I think not only emphasizes it from like the philosophical standpoint, like this is, as a city, this is what we expect. It isn't just part of our code, and we have to do it no matter what. This is what we expect. That it gives the city a little more power and freedom over the city's development, but it also, hopefully, it allows and enables the city to be more a part of what is developed commercially in these communities. It gives them the ability, gives us the ability to play more of a role, an active role in what gets developed, because it is such an intentional part of the process now instead of just for fun free. But I love the discussion, and you guys got it from here.
Thank you very much, Wes. Anyone else like to come up and address the council? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close our public hearing and bring it back to council for further discussion.
I had a question, and I agree with everything that Wes said. So when I was looking, Rob, over the minutes from 2022 when we talked about it, there was a list of strategies that we could choose from, right? This was strategy F. And under strategy F, it had a couple different things. It had permit the remaining 425 lots for Ridgeview. And then it had remove the requirement to include a commercial aspect in the PD districts. But it seems like we've separated those into two separate things, because when I look at the information that we're given, I guess I'm just wondering, when that's separated, that we had to do permit the remaining 425 lots and also remove this requirement rather than an or.
So based on what I could find, because I kind of did a review of the history, the council, we updated our modern housing plan in August 2022. The state didn't send us a notice saying it was rejected and deficient. Because we had adopted kind of the statement, the goal, but our implementation was much more loose. It was like review to see where we could rezone for higher density, and the state kind of outright rejected that. So this came out of a response to the state saying, try again, which they did to almost every single city in Utah, because we all failed our first time around trying to get this thing right. Unfortunately, I don't know, because I wasn't part of when this got drafted. That was Kelly and Crane's thing back in the day, so I couldn't find much kind of written down of how we shifted and how those specific goals and objectives got listed out. I think their desire was to make sure we had enough. The state kind of recommended have 3 to 5 implementation measures or benchmarks so we can measure your progress. I think was the advice the kind of regional planners gave cities to help them satisfy the state goals. So the planner, community development director at the time were like, okay, how can we find 3 to 4 things we can check off that relate to this strategy? And that's where we separated them out kind of as much as we could to get enough things to, essentially enough language in our modern housing plan that the state would accept it was always kind of the goal. Sorry, it's not a better answer for you.
No, that's good. I agree with Scott that I hate that the state gives us these kind of requirements, but I agree with Ron that I like what you and the planning commission changed. I think you did a great job.
The one thing that I would actually like to change from the recommendation is that if a PD contains a commercial use, I think that should still be required to be in a mixed-use zone, rather than, I don't understand the point of residential zones if we're putting commercial in them.
What you're saying is the commercial, they can come in and do a commercial lot. If they are trying to do commercial with residential, is that what you're talking about?
Well, the proposal strikes out the text. PD districts shall only be located in the mixed-use land use category, which makes sense because we're now contemplating PD districts that have no commercial in them. But I would like to change that to PD districts containing commercial use shall only be located in the mixed-use land use category. Again, it just seems to me that if we're putting commercial in there, what's the point of having a residential zone if we're putting commercial in our residential zones?
I don't understand that.
Yeah. So let's help apply this. Okay, let's apply it on the south area. I'm trying to put it in the area where it might actually happen. So we have south of Ridgeview, we have that 40 acres. So if they came in as a PD, or are you saying we'd like to have it? Are you proposing maybe to have zoning just as commercial, and then they would have something different?
No, I believe that area is already zoned as mixed use.
It is. Yeah. So
okay. So if it's mixed use, then with the change that I propose, you could put in either just residential, or you could put in residential and commercial. The long-term property, however, with the change that I'm proposing, you could not put in commercial and residential in there because it is an R140 zone.
Okay.
We would have to rezone it to mixed use.
Okay.
And just to clarify, we're going to put commercial.
We're talking 2 different things. So it's not just zoning, it's the general plan designated. It's this map in our general plan, which isn't quite zoning, and it's just clear to make that distinction because our future land use map defines what we might look at in the future. It doesn't actually set zoning. So, but to Councilmember Morgan's point, so if you see Longhorn on there, it's designated in our general plan as low density residential.
Correct.
If they were to propose a PD with commercial, the city would have to both amend the general plan to show it as mixed use and then also adopt a PD. If they did just a residential only, it could stay as it is.
And with the proposal that's in the agenda packet, that
general plan amendment would not be needed.
Correct. Council, how would you like to move forward? Any other discussion? You ready for motion?
Just one other comment about, wanting to push back on what the state is requiring. It's great to say that, we don't want the state telling us what to do. There's consequences. And, I can't remember what it's called, the legislative, it was a background work that was given to the legislators about high density or affordable housing. And they had 3 major pillars, and we want to have them stay with the pillar where they're providing incentives, not where they're taking away our funds if we don't do X, Y, and Z. So if they don't see us doing the progress, taking these steps that the staff has done all the work, the planning commission has done all the work to recommend to us, I think it has consequences. And they're going to go up that list. That 3rd pillar is where I want them to stay. I don't want them to go into where they start taking away our funds.
Okay, Rob, this is where I'm really confused. I appreciate what Ron's saying. How does this really apply to affordable housing? Because we're talking about mixed use. We're not saying we're getting rid of the mixed use zone. We're just saying we're not going to have a commercial part of it. I don't get how that becomes more affordable. That does not. We put this. I think there's an error in that we put this in our moderate income housing, which this has no correlation. Commercial and affordable housing. There's no correlation. We have correlated this together, and they're not correlated. To me, it seems confusing.
It is correlated because it frees it up.
Yeah, I read the report about it when the legislature adopted this, like the report behind each reason, and the reasoning was, Stephanie, the reasoning was that if you free up some of that commercial component, then you have more housing, which then theoretically lowers the price.
But
Which in practicality does
we
not
have
appear,
not
but
seen
that's
that
what it is.
No, but it's steps that the state has to see us take.
Okay, but we're taking, by having the PD zone, we're opening up for the housing. Because right now, if it's long form, there are R140. So if we wanted to, could we, I guess, okay, there is one way we could do this. We could pass it, but then we could bring back an amendment to general plan and remove anything that's not developed as mixed use and making sure it's all 140. And that way we met the state requirement that there's no more mixed use in our general plan that's available. But we have it. I'm just saying, if you want to play the game, we can go play the game. We'll play the game. We're doing this to play the state's game. I'm just, why are we doing this? Are we doing this to help Highland, or are we doing this to do it for the state? If it's doing it for the state, let's play a game. We're going to now go and play a board game. Our board game, we'll move our general plan, we'll meet it, and everything that's mixed use, we'll keep on our board game. Anything that's not, we go and just play that's residential. We just played their game.
We are not doing this to help Highland. We are not doing this to help the state. We are doing this to play a game. No matter what we do. Well, because moderate income housing, when you look at the requirements, it caps out in the ballpark of $350,000. It doesn't matter what we do. We're not going to get $350,000 home. I suppose we could build big apartment complexes, but that's about all we can do. That is really going to meet the moderate income housing targets that the state has set. So short of that, we are just playing games. It doesn't matter what we do.
Well, but we have to look and see what's happening. So supposedly Ridgeview was to help us with all these mandates, but there's not a place in there that you can buy for $350,000. And the problem is, and I have friends who are developers. I'm not saying anything bad about developers, but they're in there to make a profit, and they're going to push it. And in Highland, you're going to get the maximum profit. It's kind of like the $1 million townhomes here in 10700. And I think that's wonderful for the developers, but at the same time, that's not affordable housing. So it's kind of like we take these requisitions or these requirements for affordable housing, and then we run and put really expensive housing in, but it's high density. And on every survey I've ever seen, the citizens really don't want the city turned into high density because of the congestion and the effect on the schools and all this other stuff.
I mean, what have we heard the last 2 years in the council? People complain about too much traffic and speeding. Well, the higher the density, the more people you throw in here, the worse that's going to get. I'm sorry. And that's why I just have a hard problem. And the problem is the original thing, wasn't this right, Rob? Is that if we didn't do these things, they're going to take away some transportation funds, except we don't qualify for them anyway. And so were they taken away from us?
So
it's the $500 fines, the issue.
yes,
Yeah.
there is we don't get priority funds for transportation funds that we're not going to qualify for regardless. It's the fee that we're primarily worried about. And I would agree that, as Councilmember Bill stated, the idea of this strategy is that in your commercial centers, you put higher density there because you already have a lot of impact from traffic, so it's easier to fit in more units into those areas, and they're away from your, like, you know, more rural, less dense neighborhoods. You're putting it all in kind of your commercial areas. The implementation of it, though, is, I don't think is going to achieve that, and I would agree that none of our strategies are actually going to lower house prices in Highland. I mean, you might get a PD, maybe we'll have the Area 52 or something that'll come in that will have higher density, that will have, you know, under $1 million homes or townhomes or something like that. I think we're not going to hit the affordable housing, but we are doing this because the state says, the state doesn't say, make sure a house sells for $350,000. The state says, come up with 3 strategies and come up with lists that we approve and then do that.
And that's what we're talking about.
And that's what we're doing tonight. We're not, so they don't say get this result, they say do these steps, and
so we're stuck, we're playing our game. And I'm sorry, we're playing the game that we have to do the 3 strategies. So guys, we can play the game. And we cannot have, and if we're okay, we're worried about how this might come in, then we do what we can do as a city, and we change our general plan. If the game augments and changes the way we want it, we change our general plan land use so that the game doesn't affect our play. I mean, we're the land use authority here in the city. And all we're doing is we're just trying to meet the standard. I mean, tonight's about moderate income housing plan that we submitted to the state in 2022. Exactly. That's what we're talking about. And if we're changing so if we change on our map the mixed use saying they don't have to have commercial or they have to justify it, and we're worried that we're going to have a developer, to me, then you go change your land use in the area you're worried about.
They can know about commercial. The very first meeting with that developer, we can say, we want commercial, period. I mean, that's how we do it.
Well,
I'd be more committed to making sure we had commercial if we pass this. Because it is something we do need. I'm not trying to minimize what we have. I'm trying to meet a state requirement that we don't come back and haunt us later.
Rob, my fear is not tonight or this council. It's probably not for the next 5 years. My fear is 10 years down the road, the council did not understand why that change was done in the code. I mean, that's the concern. It's not our council. We understand what just happened here. Do we have a PD zone sitting out there that another council applied because they didn't understand how can we make that change? That's my point.
Well, it all depends on who's the council. I mean, in the state legislature, there's a lot of influence for developers. And, maybe it will be our council.
What would the council like to do? We have a moderate income, this is 3 things on the agenda, is to meet the moderate income housing. We put in our proposal that we would eliminate. Now, I'm wondering why we use the word that we would eliminate instead of we look at eliminating. Why do we use the word we would eliminate versus we would look at eliminating?
I couldn't find any specific discussion. My thought is 2 reasons. One, after the state rejected our first attempt, they told us to be try to get as specific as possible to remove that wiggle room that we and a lot of cities did where we said something like, we will review or we will consider. So we tried to put a few things in there that were hard and fast. As to the specific one, it was thought of, I think, kind of just as initial. We control PDs legislatively anyway. Removing the commercial aspect still allows the council to require commercial because it's still fully up to the council. And also, we don't have many areas left that could even apply for a PD that would make sense. I mean, I have people that come into my office every other week asking for rezones on property, and they say, you can apply, the council's going to deny it. So I anticipate if we get this, my answer would be, sure, the council said theoretically, but that doesn't mean your 2-acre parcel is going to get 50 townhomes on it. The council will deny that, so don't bother. They can apply, you have the right to apply, but it's just not going to go anywhere. So I anticipate this will maybe in certain areas where we do only want it residential. This does free up the council to do that. Say that Area 52 comes in, and we do only want that residential, because it doesn't really make sense to put commercial up there because only Beacon Hills can access
But
it.
you're assuming that we want to also do a mixed use up there. I'm not thinking.
And we
that's
may
mixed
not,
use.
but we may allow for it. The reason I wrote in, I proposed saying a mixed use of housing types is because I didn't want someone to come in and propose only townhomes. I wanted them to come in and propose at least, even if it's higher as a single family, a mix of housing types. So it's not just, we put as many townhomes as we could fit into here. It was, you're showing some variation of that.
So let me ask you this question, Rob, since you're with the planning, we're going to use Area 52. Right now, they're not in the city, but as they've talked to the council, they've kind of said, like, you to come as R140. It appears to me that now every development is going to try to use the PD zone because it's not an R140, R130, or R120. They're now going to slip everything to PD because they don't have to have commercial with it, and they can then.
And it can be multifamily, and that's a.
No, I'm just saying that's what I'm hearing is by doing this, and this market, I think we'll start seeing a lot of PDs coming in because now I understand they're going to say, well, like if your viewers go, we don't believe commercial will be viable at that corner, so we would like to have PD and we don't believe it's viable, and that's why we didn't bring in commercial. And the reason on Area 52, I'd like to have a PD zone up there, I don't believe commercial will be viable. I'd like you to, and so then we also don't have to stick to our zoning, and they can start proposing. And this is where I get concerned about the spot zoning in the city. We have protected the city and not just having townhomes throughout the city. We've been very cautious where they've been, and that's what we're doing the general plan for, is to try to keep that vision of what we want it to look like and not be spotted. Because that's, if someone asks what I think a lot of other cities made errors, is spot zoning. I think they've allowed spot zoning to happen throughout their city. And that's the only concern I have about the PD. I agree we can make the amendment. I'm just worried that every developer is going to use the PD against us.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so do we make this change tonight and then we address that when we do our general plan update?
All right, you ready? We have a motion?
I move I'll do motion. Do you get what I include Doug's or?
What's Doug's, that's yours.
Yeah.
It was basically to preclude commercial PDs that have a commercial use from residential zone areas.
I move the City Council approve the proposed amendments to Chapter 3, Article 5 of the Highland Development Code.
I second that. I have a motion by Kim, second by Ron. Any further discussion before we go to vote?
Rob, question with regard to the state. One of the options that we have is not to make this change, and presumably, if we're not making this change, then we will want to go back and adjust our general plan to remove that and perhaps replace it with something else. Do you have any feel for if we go through and simply remove that, is that going to be something that we get rejected and are in this kind of constant cycle of fighting with the state about what our plan is, or is that something that seems plausible?
I don't have a feel, unfortunately, because we've only done that cycle once. Maybe I'll just also respond by saying, if you're doing kind of the modern housing shuffle, you can approve this amendment, revisit modern housing as part of our general plan update, get that approved by state with tweaks, and then we can re-amend code at any time. If you desire to go back to the way things were,
Or choose a different strategy.
choose a different strategy and then go back to the way things were with a different strategy now that we don't have this, that's always an option.
Or we just make sure our map has done the areas that are in use on our maps, and we need to be very careful with our land use maps.
Correct. Although, if I'm understanding correctly, the motion on the table, on the floor, we would not be able to adjust with our land use maps because PD zone would be, PD district would be applicable in any possible zone in the city.
That is correct. But we could, the general plan itself could state that the city would prefer to, because we have low density, you know, we could have goals and things stated in the general plan where higher density should be pursued as part of first the general plan amendment and then this. I mean, there are a lot of knobs to tweak to expand or limit this as the council desires, both in code and in the general plan. But you are correct, it's freed up for any land use designation in the city to have PDs in it potentially.
And I know there's already been 4 council members, and any based off that decision, I guess everyone's good on their vote, as is. If there's still discussion going on, as some voting, everyone's still good with their vote? Okay. Okay. That passes 3-2.
Mayor, can I just say something? So this little corollary is not on the agenda, and I apologize, but at the end of the planning commission, there was a big discussion about how we get our internet sales tax. And I still, every time I buy anything, my address always comes up in American Fork. And I'd like to have Dave look into that, because I still think we have a lot of sales tax leakage into American Fork. I don't know how it can help but be.
So okay, if you buy on Amazon, they use a sector code. So if you notice, we'll say 84003-3414.
Right.
That is your street specifically. It's going in the sector. Where the concern comes, Dave, is if you're a buyer and it only has the 84003 and it doesn't want that sector code, because that is software based, and depending on who that vendor, that's where we have the risk. And we did find slippage. When we did a thing a couple years back, we did find slippage. And maybe it's time, we did apply, but maybe now it's time we put John Curtis, now with Mike Kennedy, and some of that, and ask to get our own zip code.
Yeah, I want to work with Mike and see if we can get our own zip code. Unfortunately, Mike said, gee, you took my signs down. So where did that come? What discussion, because, But I think we need to work with the congressman and we need to get our own zip code.
I mean, what I have the question, is there a way to get the whole state tax commission say, we understand you use sector, but some software does not do the sector send out. How, I guess to have you come back and say, this is how we still guarantee we get the sales tax, that it doesn't go to American Fork. Do you understand? I think you understand.
Yeah, I have a connection with the tax commission that I can reach out to and get an explanation, and we can dive into our data and see if there's any discrepancies or issues that we can find.
When Gary Duchamp was here, we really got into that, about 5 or 6 years ago, trying to find the sector. But we did find slippage in some that, we're going, how do we get that worked out? And we applied, so just to give you we then applied to get our own zip code with the post office, and that came back. They denied it, saying, hey, you haven't filled up your own current zip code. The 84003 had still a lot more. We actually asked about going maybe, parking with Alpine, because we felt like it was closer on some things.
And Cedar Hills may be interested too, because their zip code was Pleasant Grove.
Yeah.
So they have leakage, I'm sure. And so I just think we need to look into it.
So if you can maybe ask them, how do they address if it doesn't have that forest sector code on the site?
Yeah, I'll dive into that and see what I can find out for you.
Let's move on to our next item. Item number 4B, which is the ordinance, the cross-connection control authority statement that we have, and that will be Chris Trustee that will be
And we've had some discussion on this and making some changes to it. So with the timeline that we've had, I didn't really put together a presentation for it, but I would like to make some quick comments on this. And then what we'd like to do is bring this back. We'd like to continue this item to the next city council meeting and address some of the concerns that council member Courtney's brought up, and hopefully bring the council something that makes a little bit more sense to other people, and you can get something passed. But our intent with this is with the state code is just to have an ordinance that has some direction and some teeth to it, so that we can enforce a cross connection. contamination, so we can prevent that. You know, we don't want to have situations where we've got a PI system or opt to provide opportunities to make sure that we don't have a connection between that PI system and our culinary system. We're just trying to protect our culinary water from any sources of contamination that residents could unknowingly or knowingly, in some cases, you know, make these connections. And our biggest concern that we have with this is really with businesses and then with institutional uses, not necessarily residents. That's where some of our bigger concerns come from. And with that, I don't know that I have a whole lot more that I wanted to present.
So you'd like to have this
bring this
continue
back by asking for you.
Do we need a motion, Rob, to that to continue it?
Can I ask some questions before we continue it though? So I guess the big questions I had now, 20 plus years ago, when the Highland Water Company became part of the city, Mark Thompson, who was former mayor, he was in charge of the water. They came into my neighborhood and they made sure that there were backflow apparatus to prevent any cross-contamination. Because we had our own private irrigation system. And I'll be honest, when my irrigation was put in 35 years ago, I could do either culinary or pressurized irrigation. I had a system of several valves and that, so there wasn't cross-contamination. But he made sure, I mean, they came like 5 times and put in a backflow thing. So I think a lot of this has been done. Is this concern about new developments, or are you going to come around and inspect everybody's house, or what's going on?
We don't anticipate going around and inspecting everyone's homes. I do agree that I think a lot of this has already been done. Part of it is us making sure that new development primarily, any changes to code that may have occurred over the last 20 years has also been implemented for the city.
Yeah. I know mine's done. They came 5 times, so they should.
Okay, so if everyone's okay, we will need a motion to continue item number 4.
Before that motion, I'd like to, just a couple of things. One, my home had a valve, or if I could go either or. And if I turn that on, it would be cross-contamination. First thing I did when I saw that is I dug it up and took it out. And it only is secondary. The second is, if we can do this and require this, which we should, I'm still struck by the fact that the city is liable and responsible for any backflow that comes out of the sewer systems. And there are systems that can be put into homes, new homes. I wouldn't require this for existing homes, but for new homes, that when that sewer line is connected up, right outside the home, at the owner's expense, is a one-way valve. That it can flow into the system, but if we get a backup, it will not flow into the home. We could save ourselves a lot of liability if we required that on all new development. It's about a $200 item. It lasts 10, 15 years. They will have to replace it every 10 or 15 years. They have to have access, which is kind of like a manhole cover to get down to it, to repair it and replace it. But if we were to look at doing something like that, I'd just like the city to maybe look into, have other cities that have done anything like that? Because to me, it seems like we mitigate a lot of liability. My daughter, living in Harriman, had a backup, and it was disastrous. Tens of thousands of dollars of sewage, repair and restoring of her home, all at the city's expense. She didn't have to pay a dime. The city paid for it. So if we're liable for that, it seems like we could have a mitigating factor there.
I'd be happy to look at that. My understanding on some of those one-way valves on a sewer lateral like that is they can also be as much of a problem as they can benefit, just because they are more susceptible to backups. I absolutely can look at what other cities have done, and I can talk with our building officials.
I'm going to go on my own.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to continue.
Chris,
Yeah. No, go ahead.
go ahead. What you gonna do? Or
No, I just move that the Highland City Council will continue item 4B And how much time? Do you need to do this immediately, or can we just continue it?
We can continue it. There's no real urgency to it.
Okay.
It's something that they had started to look at with Andy Spencer when he was here, and then it just kind of got tabled.
Okay.
So
I move we continue the motion until the staff has time to do more research.
Okay. Motion by Scott, second by Doug. Go ahead and vote on that. Maybe we just need to do it in the historic voice. There you go. This is the continuing. That is 5-2. Now we'll move on to our expedited items. Number 5A, is resolution of interlocal agreement with the Cedar Hills for building inspector services, and that will be Rob Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We did one like this with Draper City not too long ago. Cedar Hills reached out and said, oh, we want to do it as well because we create the same third-party inspection list that everyone else does. So it's there's 2 minor tweaks. It's basically the same template that's been circulating around the cities. So the general terms are each city agrees to provide up to 8 hours free of inspection services. We have yet to use it for Draper. Draper has yet to use it from us. We don't anticipate needing to use it. We've always been able to provide inspections as required. We sometimes do use third-party inspectors on commercial or bigger things, but in terms of not being able to get to it, we've not had that issue. All the employees remain under the control of their respective cities, insurance, workman's comp, all that stays the same with the cities. We just go in and do an inspection if we need to. But I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any regarding this.
Seeing none, we have a motion.
I move that the city council approve the interlocal agreement with Cedar Hills and adopt the proposed resolution.
I'll second.
And I have a motion by Ron, second by King. Passes 5-0. Now on the item 5B, ordinance for suspense annexation. This is the ordinance update from Rob Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the annexation the council's already approved twice. When the council approved on September 17th, it started the 60-day shot clock to wrap it up. As they move forward, you'll see kind of on here on the west side, that parcel has an overlap with existing parcels on the west, which means they're claiming that's all of their land, so they want it all in Highland. That means there's a little overlap with Lehigh parcels, so the cities have to solve that boundary issue. The deadline to finish the annexation was this week, so we thought, rather than start this whole thing over again, let's adopt a new ordinance and start the 60-day clock again. We're also having the council consent to adjust the boundary lines between, I guess, the future boundary line between Highland and Lehigh to align with this. It'll kind of come down to what the county requires in terms of approval. They may require a more formal approval from the city council to this boundary line. If so, we'll have a public hearing.
Is there a fence there?
There's a fence. It's an old fence line that it follows.
Which line? The city line or the property?
I think this line follows the fence, which is why they're claiming it, and the property owners have all agreed to a boundary line agreement between them.
Interesting.
And Lehigh submitted a letter saying they're fine with shifting this. It's just trying to get the county to allow it and the state to allow it. We're asking you just to reapprove an ordinance. We have more time if we needed to get this all resolved. They've already submitted a subdivision plan. We're working through it, so they're wanting to move forward. Let's try to wrap up this annexation. It became more of a headache than we thought it would be. Happy to answer any questions. So.
I just want to make a comment. Anytime I can sit on the council and we can annex a little piece of Lehigh, I am so happy. Even if it's just inches.
So do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that the city council adopt the ordinance approving the Smith annexation subject to the conditions set forth in the packet therein.
Second.
Motion by Scott, second by Doug. Vote on that one.
Oh, sorry.
5-0. Okay, well now moving on to discussion items only. These are not actual items. We will have a discussion on item number 5A, or I'm sorry, 6A, which is a fire station driveway bid. And that will be coming in from Chris Trustee.
Over here and so we've got some pictures that we took just earlier today to kind of show the condition of the existing driveway. This one's a video. I'd like you to take a look at it if I can get it to play on this. You can see it shifting as Jeff is out there moving his foot. He's not even as heavy as I am, so that's a little bit concerning when you have some of these larger vehicles driving on it. There you go. And so we have put together kind of a concept drawing of it. You can see that this extends the existing area of the overall parking lot and driveway area to also enlarge the turn radius that we have into the building. That what they had currently really is a very tight turn into and out of the building that they have. And so we were looking at doing a thickened section for that, so that it can actually accommodate the larger vehicles that would be going in and out of there. And we put together some estimates of different alternatives. We had originally budgeted $100,000 for this project, not really knowing or having gone through kind of an estimate process to see how much this might really cost us. If we were to do all asphalt with that one red drive approach with a thickened section, the estimate is just under $280,000. We also looked at doing just what was shown in red, the driveway access in concrete, and then doing the rest of it in asphalt. That cost would be about $325,000. To do all concrete, it would be about $338,000. And again, that's based on estimates. We'd have to actually go out to bid to get actual dollars on it. But the staff's recommendation, just because of the lower maintenance and the more longevity that we would have with concrete, is to go with the concrete. Recommend all concrete on the parking lot, the drive approach and the park installs. We would just have to come up with the additional $238,000 of funding for that. I think part of our thoughts were if the if the different alternatives were a little bit more spread out, maybe we would feel more comfortable recommending the asphalt, but considering that they're all fairly close together, I think that this gives less ongoing maintenance, more longevity for the driveway, and that would be our recommendation. But we wanted to present these alternatives to the City Council and get your feedback, and I think David has looked at some different funding mechanisms where we take this out of the general fund, and he may have some input.
Yeah. So I know we had talked in a previous meeting about the fiscal year 24 general fund reserves and how a portion of that would be needed to be transferred to the capital project funds. And at that time, we didn't have a specific amount for it, but we knew it would be around $1 to $1.5 million. After doing a bunch of our journal entries, we don't have official audited numbers yet, but I feel more comfortable now giving you a number, and it's actually closer to 1.8 million. And as you recall, it's due to the formula that's used that tells us how much we're allowed to have in our general fund reserves. We can only have 35% of the current year's general fund revenues. And so in fiscal year 23, we had some grant funds that we did not see in fiscal year 24. So that in turn decreases the amount of reserves we're allowed to have in 24. So basically we need to transfer that amount into the capital projects funds anyway. So this is a potential source of funds for this project if we wanted to use it for that.
I'd just like to say that over the years, I see this as quality. The highest qualities at the bottom, the lowest qualities at the top. I have never, ever bought quality and regretted it. I have bought less quality and regretted it most of the time. It's an incremental cost. We can mix it and say, well, let's put some asphalt in. I grew up with asphalt on a driveway in my home that I grew up with for many years, and we replaced it every 3 or 4 years. It was a joke. Compared to concrete, Every home I've ever built, ever since then, I've always put concrete in. Even on the long driveway, 670-foot driveway, I put concrete. And it's very expensive, but guess what? It's going to be there 50 years from now. So I see this as a quality thing. I highly support the staff's recommendation of all concrete.
I have some questions. What year was the fire station opened up, Chief? I mean, we built this building in 2008, wasn't it similar time frame?
Yeah, we got into it about 2008.
So that driveway's been there 16 years.
Yeah.
And I assume this new one, it certainly, this price must be much better. Because the one you showed is cement and it's all cracked out.
Yes, I think part of the problem, the fire truck weighs 82,000 pounds. And with the angle of approach when we come in and having 8 tires push to make that 90-degree turn, really I think probably what would have solved this was to utilize the whole piece of property and come in at a different angle. I think we wouldn't have had near the problems that we've had. It's a heavy truck that's turning really, really sharp.
So actually it's a design problem more than what the surface is composed of, is that right?
Yeah.
I think part of the problem is I don't believe the existing concrete is reinforced. I don't think it has rebar in it. So I think
that would also be a huge problem.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So, I mean, Ron's talking about how asphalt wouldn't hold up. What's your estimate how many years this would hold up? Because obviously the previous ones only held up 15 years.
I think it would be at least 30 years of proper maintenance.
What's proper maintenance on a surface like this?
Making sure that you've got proper drainage on it, making sure that if you do any crack sealing that might come up when you do have cracks, and addressing them when they're small before they get too big. With concrete, you've got a lot less maintenance than you would with asphalt. With asphalt, you'd be having to do surface treatments probably every 3 to 5 years on it. So with concrete, you probably wouldn't even have to do that.
So to do this, I assume there would be a bidding process. I mean, this is kind of an estimate that you think it would cost from your experience. Is that correct?
That's correct. Using some recent bids that we've gotten, that's what this price is. We could always put together 2 bidding scenarios, one for the complete concrete, but one as an asphalt, so we could see an actual comparison to it.
So when we talked about this a few months ago, we thought it would be 100,000, and so we've gone tripled. I mean, what is the triple cost based on? I mean, why did we think it was going to be, and you weren't here, so it's an unfair question for you, but why did we think it'd be 100,000, now it's 3.5 times that?
I'm not sure that we knew exactly what the full extent was. I think we were probably looking at more replacing just the smaller parking lot as constructed now, instead of going out with a wider turning radius, and not actually putting together some solid quantities that we could use as an estimate. I think it was more of a number that was, a little bit ballparked.
Okay, so I guess my question is this for Chief Penn. I thought the fire trucks went out the other end of the building, and they just return on the east end?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're coming in on the.
They come in on this side,
On
and they
this
go
side.
out on the other.
Yes.
So what's the status of the cement on the other side?
The
I mean, I walked on it, during the.
Because it's probably not turning radius.
The only place where we have the turning radius is right before where it hits the asphalt, which has been replaced probably 5 years ago, and again was reinforced. And so we have replaced a little section of concrete where we do turn, but the majority of the front apron is in good shape.
So you're not going to need to replace that next year?
No.
I mean, if you look at the estimates, they're estimating about 75,000 just to rip all of that concrete out. This concrete, I don't know how thick the concrete currently is there. I believe this is going to be they're going a lot thicker. It could be reinforcement. I think coming back to what Councilmember Smith was saying, I think it's going to be important to make sure we go out and get enough bids. This is one that I think there's a lot of contractors out there. Well, we couldn't get some. I think concrete is one where a lot of contractors, can do this type of work. So my recommendation, if we do want to move forward, is we try to get a little farther swath than just putting it on the state bid thing, that we maybe try to solicit and get several, if we can get, instead of 3, if we get 10 good bids on this, I think we'll know what our pricing is supposed to be, because there could be someone that comes in at 160, and then you might have someone for it. Concrete's expensive. I mean, the other option, chief, is, you know, some fire departments just back in and out. We don't have this whole back side for the fire trucks to come in. They have to back. And
I can drive.
No.
Backwards?
Yeah.
We haven't even seen you drive forward.
That's not because I haven't asked.
I understand there's safety concerns with back.
A lot of safety concerns, you know, it's.
With me driving backwards?
Yes, with everybody driving backwards. Crashing into the station and knocking a wall down at the station is going to cost us way more than $300,000, not to mention the damage to the $1 million piece of fire apparatus. So, but I mean, yes, we absolutely, that is something.
There is an option.
There is an option, and we are going to have to do that while this is under construction. I mean, it's not.
Now, one thing is we need to be aware, as if you look here, there are some garden boxes there that let the Toscana residents rent. That this would contemplate that they would be going away, and you've seen the parking changing as you see in the drawing that was done.
I believe the plan is not that they will go away.
Well,
I believe the plan is that they will be moved.
Yeah, I think we can move them to another location, even over here by the where we have our little nursery.
I would agree that we should go out for bid. I think as part of that, we should make sure that she thinks this is the very, because there's a lot of like space there to just make sure that whatever we're doing is the most durable and is going to function the best as long as we're doing it.
So my other question is we have this dark red curve. What happens to the rest of the parking lot in there? Are you surfacing it too?
We would be redoing the.
So the lighter pink, is that also resurfaced as well?
Correct. It would all be.
All torn out, all
torn out and replaced. The red would just be a thicker concrete section.
That's a little bit probably why your cost estimate should come. This is I mean, if you go there, it's not just a driveway like we think of our house. It's quite a large area and a whole redoing of the area.
So just for the regular parking where you're not curving in, you have to have the same.
No, I think that's right. Just look here, the thickness of it. So Chris, are we thinking the red area is going to be a 7.5 or 10 inch thickness, but the other area would not be the same thickness? Or you think you keep the thickness the same way through?
No, it would be thicker for the red section, and the rest of it would be a thinner section. Yeah.
So council feedback. You know, this is discussion. Go out to bid. This is what we got.
Yeah, and I like your idea of, you know, trying to get as many bids as possible.
I just think, as representative of citizens, it's hard to explain that we're putting in a driveway for $250,000. It just seems like we should do what we can to economize. I mean, we want it to be good, we want it to last a long time, but, you know, does the lighter pink areas all have to be, I mean, you're gonna do less concrete there, but maybe asphalt. I don't know. I just think we need to look at ways to.
And that's the hybrid solution that we put together, was to do those in asphalt, and we could do that. But I also think that when you do that, you lose some of your economy of scale that you get. You have two different contractors usually that would be doing the asphalt work and one doing the concrete work. So I'm not sure that you really save as much as you might think that you would be able to.
No. But I have to express, I think this is incredibly expensive.
That's what it is. It's out there. Okay, well now we have number 6B, which is the fire sprinklers for homes over 10,000 square feet. Rob?
Thanks, and I'm going to throw Chief Patton under the bus slightly as well. And you weren't at our executive staff meeting, so I didn't warn you this was coming. Okay. No, Brooklyn's driving again. So a couple of months ago, we had a builder doing a home in Highland, didn't propose fire sprinklers in a home over 10,000 square feet. Jason, our building official, said, go put them in. He said, fire code says you have to have an ordinance from the city implementing that requirement. Show it to me, and we didn't have it. So that's the first time staff learned that wasn't an automatic requirement of fire code, it was a opt-in requirement. So state fire code says cities can require automated fire sprinklers in certain circumstances for single-family homes. This is separate from commercial.
We add this as part of moderate income housing. I think this would be, we already require for 10,000 square foot homes, they have to have fire sprinklers.
And now they're more expensive. So these, the bulleted lists are, these are the circumstances state fire code allows us to require fire sprinklers to part of a single family home. In the homes in the urban wildland interface, when there's no fire hydrants nearby, when there's a single fire access road that is greater than 10% grade for more than 500 continual feet. We have one place in Highland that is like that. Where? That's a great question, Brittany. When the home is over 10,000 square feet, or in a weirdly worded thing, when the home is double the size of every other home in the subdivision, that's under 10,000 square feet. I guess if you have one really big home, they worry about it. So we have a few options. We can keep it as is, where we don't require fire sprinklers. Chief Patton, as I understood what you had said by email, was essentially mirror state law, just require it where it's there. Our building official was open to have a little bit of flexibility in larger homes where we look at fire flows, and some cities have done that. It does kind of add a more administrative burden to have them go test the fire hydrants, and we have to make sure our system is working to do that. And so we have to kind of get on a more case-by-case basis rather than just say, oh, get 10,000 and put in fire sprinklers. So we wanted to bring this to council to get your feedback before we proposed an ordinance, and I'm sure Chief Patton has opinions as well.
Chief Patton would like to give us some input.
Would you require it?
What's that?
Would you require it?
I would require it. Really, the idea.
Done.
Right?
Really, the idea, I appreciate that. Really, the idea behind fire sprinklers in homes over 10,000 square feet is travel path. Assuming that the house is, you could have all on one story in a 10,000 square foot Walmart sized structure to get from one side to the other, or if you did have a fire for mom to go to the kids' bedrooms and back out to a bedroom. Really, residential sprinklers are designed to get people out of the structure safely, minimize the fire. In the urban interface, it's to slow down the fire. Residential sprinklers are not like a commercial sprinkler, not like in this building. If these sprinklers went off, I mean, it would be like a pressurized sprinkler system. In a residential, really anything over 3 heads pops, it's gonna probably incapacitate. Although probably not in Highland, especially that way in Highland. They could probably support a whole house worth of sprinklers just because of the pressures. But it's really about safety of the residents. If we can slow down a fire for those first 5 minutes, where it's crucial to slow it down, we can get there, we can put that fire out. In the urban interface, you guys do have urban interface up by Beacon Hills and in Bull River, those types of areas. Really the idea is if we can get that fire stopped, it doesn't go to brush and then to the next home and the next home and clear to Draper. And anyways.
So I have one question for you, Rob. And I think this makes sense, but as a council, if we vote for this, does this meet a criteria for affordable housing?
Like I said, the reason we have to build a pushback in the first place is because they are expensive. It's an additional cost to put these into a home. For homes that are this size, it's an incremental cost comparatively. It will not do anything for moderate income housing whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
We also get a lot of pushback on that they are not aesthetically pleasing to have sprinkler caps in your house. That's another reason people don't want to do it. One of the things I will point out is every other city around us has a sprinkler requirement.
This does add quite a bit of cost to that home. But they're also the ones designing the home that large.
Things like 10,000 square feet.
It's an incremental cost of 10,000 square foot home. So it does add there is a cost to it, but it is something that is already building 10,000 plus square foot home. I'm not trying to discount the people building that, but they're building a custom home to begin with. So it's not a cheap home.
How many homes do you think this would, I understand it's new, but how many would be hitting that in Highland? I mean, what are we seeing with homes coming in? I mean, what percentage do you think of the hit?
third, I would say, of the ones in like the Millhaven development seem to be about that size. They're quite large.
The square footage does include the garage space as well as sports courts. So if it's an indoor attached sports court, that's what we're seeing. Even on homes where you look at it, you wouldn't think it was 10,000. They go down and they've got a sports court or something like that. And that's where we pick up a lot of sites, especially in Highland. I would agree. I would say probably a third of the homes in Highland.
Okay, so let's kind of walk back through. You mentioned you felt like it was important to have it inside the home versus, here was making sure fire sprinklers are adequate at a flow close by. Are you saying that would not be because you're trying to slow it down while the people are in their home going through halls?
Yes, yeah, this is all about, all about protecting the resident of that home prior to the fire department getting there. We do need the flows as far as us fighting the fire, but that requires a fire truck. Really having a fire hydrant in your front yard that's highly pressurized does nothing to put your fire out until somebody gets there and can utilize that fire hydrant. So while the flows are good and the pressure's good, it is going to help the sprinkling system, but until the fire engine gets there, really the fire hydrant isn't doing much for fighting that fire.
And I'm not trying to be nice here, but how many times are you selling the fear factor versus the reality? How many times do we have a home 10,000 square feet really get fully engulfed? I mean, or if even a home that's 5,000, that I can think of a couple. I understand that one home going, hey, we could have saved some things, but is this a reality that a 10,000 square foot home, that it's large enough that the fire spread that fast? That it's that great of a fear?
I mean, if you think about everything you have in your house as far as, your couches, basically everything that we have, all the contents in our houses these days are more or less petroleum products. Fire spread. We used to say that fire doubles every minute. We now have that. We're teaching fire doubles about every 15 to 20 seconds. And one of the things when it comes to research, this comes from the IFC, which is the International Fire Code. It gets adopted by the state. And then that's where the cities would adopt it from the state code. So this isn't something that's just here, this is actually international.
If we needed to limit the requirement to homes that are on that urban boundary, would that address the concern about spread of fire from house to house?
It doesn't stop the spread of fire, but basically what we're trying to do is keep that fire small. So even, you can put a 2,500 square foot home up in the urban interface, it's still required to be sprinkled so that we can try to keep that fire minimized until we can get there and hopefully put that out. Once the fire goes to once it gets on the outside of the structure and potentially in the trees, it's at that point really hard to stop it from going home to home.
What I'm wondering about is if there seems to me that there are two different things that we're talking about here from a public safety standpoint. One is being safe in your own home if there's a fire, and two is protecting the rest of the city if there's a fire.
Yes, yeah, we're trying to protect. If you start a fire in your kitchen, we're not potentially burning down the neighborhood. Yes. Absolutely.
And if we focus on that urban boundary case, does that reasonably address the protecting the rest of the city? Or do we still have significant concern outside of that?
We do have concern outside of that. We would also talk about defensible space as far as 30 to 50 feet of not having trees, shrubs, or specific trees and shrubs that are not fireproof but don't burn. You don't want pine trees right up next to your house, those types of things.
And my recollection is that if that exception case, the 50 feet on each side is one of the...
Yes, there's an exception in the state park that says even if it otherwise means this, you can't require it. If it's outside the urban, it must meet three conditions. Outside the urban wildland interface, it's in a single lot subdivision, which I'm not quite sure why that's a requirement. We don't have a lot of those in Highland. All of ours are in larger subdivisions. And it has 50 feet at least of defensible space, which would have to be not just yard, but actually cleared of and maintained that way. So we wouldn't have any that would meet those criteria to be exempted. I also want to point out, we have been requiring fire sprinklers in homes over 10,000 square feet for a while. It was, all of the homes, as far as I know, up until the one recently, have all been required to do it. The builders have just built it that way. This was the first time we got pushback, and we said, I guess technically we can't require, we can still recommend it. And the builders said, we don't want to, and went ahead with it. So this is us trying to, we haven't had pushback though in requiring this because, as Chief Patton said, it's so commonly required that no one else questioned it.
This is standard. I mean, it's pretty rare these days that, like in Alpine, which is the only other place I work these days, every house is sprinkled. So we don't get a lot of pushback.
Okay. We'll now move on to the next discussion item, which is sewer rates. Item number 6C, sewer rates. That will be you, David. We get to talk about sewer.
Yeah, everybody's favorite topic, right? So we're going to try something. We have Fred Philpott with LRB is giving the presentation tonight. He's on Zoom. We've been having some audio issues. So I believe we're going to try to...
Yeah. Fred, can you hear us right now? And try and say something. Oh, he's calling me, so that means he can't say.
We're going to try and put the phone up to the mic and see if you can hear him okay that way. If not,
Okay.
I will be fumbling my way through
Yeah.
the presentation.
Got it. Okay, go ahead, Fred.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, and can you still see my screen?
No, I haven't put it up yet. Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
I got my hand up in the air with this.
There it is. Okay. There it is. Hold on. Sorry, it's been a minute. Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. Okay, yeah, your screen is up now.
Perfect. So I think
Sorry to interrupt. Is there a way to maximize his presentation on that so that, because there's going to be some numbers that may be hard to read. If you change the view settings on there. Much better, thank you.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Alrighty, my guess, just based on what I can hear in the background, is I may need some help with questions, if council has questions. Since I may or may not catch those. And then I just want to confirm, are you getting any feedback on your end? Any issue with sound?
I think we're good.
Nope. Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
So, my objective this evening is to review the updated scenarios based on council directive, and then really we would need to focus in on what our preferred alternative is, and then we can move to next steps, adoption, documentation of rate recommendations. So I'll be going through quite a few scenarios in different iterations as we discussed previously, and show you the outcome of those. So I did want to highlight our baseline scenario was with no new rate increase and the measurement of our days of cash on hand relative to the initial target of 365 days. In some of the additional scenarios, we've established a lower target of 270 days, and I'll show you what that looks like. But this is just the illustration of the baseline with no rate increase and falling really to almost a zero fund balance. So this scenario one we discussed previously. This was an upfront rate increase followed by a smaller increase, but still double digit, just to the city rate portion until 2027, in which case we would then shift to an inflationary increase to all rate elements. So this is one we already reviewed last time, meeting our target of 365 days. And we showed the rate change. So here you go from $7.15 on the residential base rate for the city portion up to $14.86. The TSSD base rate and boosted rate does not change until you get out into those inflationary increases. And again, this was designed to try to balance the revenue generation when we look at the city portion versus the TSSD portion and compare that to expense. Again, this is not a new scenario when we discussed it last time. We pointed out previously that while we're proposing a large increase to the scenario 1, rates combined, it's not as big of an increase, right? Because we're not really changing the TSSD rate. So while we do have a big upfront increase to the city bill, the TSSD bill remains the same at least through 2026, resulting in a 16.5% overall increase in those first 2 years. I also added a table that showed the increase through 2030 to give you an idea. If we implement those inflationary increases, obviously that would be a larger increase because we're layering on those inflationary numbers at the tail end of that 5-year planning horizon. So under scenario 1, the rate goes from, the combined rate goes from $53 up to $67, which is a 26% increase. Again, I wanted to highlight, if I'm going to jump back a couple of slides, that's essentially showing what the rates would look like if we did everything, right? If we had that upfront increase and the inflationary increases. I wanted to provide you a table of what that looked like as we compare the overall bill. So each scenario is going to have those two tables that show the short-term impact, the impact from 2024, your current rates, to 2026. But then we also wanted to show the 2030 impact because some of the recommendations from the council were to phase in the rate over the 5-year period. And so there's a longer-term impact. So I wanted to look at those comparisons as well. I'll also point out that one of the elements that we need to consider as we look at these scenarios is the rate adjustments reflect an inflationary increase to the TSSD expense. So we've grown in the model the TSSD line item by an inflationary amount. It does not assume, we haven't built into the model substantial increases like what you've experienced in the past. So if that happens again, where your TSSD expense increases dramatically, then you likely have to go back and revisit these scenarios to try to capture that type of cost pressure in the model.
Does this include the anticipated 15% increase January 1st?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so we are accounting for the past increases and the proposed increases through the 2025 budget.
Fred, I believe it does not include the potential 2026 15% increase. Is that
Oh,
correct?
sorry. Okay, yes, no, it does
But it
not.
does anticipate the 2025 15%.
I thought you said 2025, but.
I think that's what he meant. I just wanted to clarify that they're anticipating another increase in 2026.
That's built into this?
It's not.
It's not. We have to revisit it because it's not finalized by them. It's just a potential. So, but if they do finalize that, we would need to come back and revisit.
Fred, did you have one that had it coming in? You said you had a 5-year scenario. Is that the scenario number 2?
I didn't quite hear that question.
Okay, we're only seeing scenario number 1. Do you have other scenarios that present?
Yes, yeah, I'm going to go through more scenarios. So here's another scenario 2, which was the council indicated that you wanted to see more of a phased-in approach. And so we looked at a phased rate increase just on the city rate portion. So you can see I programmed an 18% increase every year rather than a 60% upfront followed by a 20% increase. We would have to do something like this, an 18% increase every year to the city rate, plus an inflationary increase on the TSSD rate to get us the same outcome as scenario 1. So this one is showing you if we kept the same 365-day cash target, what we need to do to phase that in. That gets us again to that 365 days of cash on hand, but it requires a larger increase to do that. So, as we discussed previously, typically a phased-in approach often results in a higher long-term rate because you're not benefiting from compounding revenue generation. So if we phase that in, one of the downsides to that is the potential larger long-term rate. But sometimes it's more feasible to phase that in over time just due to other constraints and affordability. So I recognize that often there's a need to try to phase that in. Scenario 2 is a phase-in approach, keeping the 365-day target. And as you can see here, in the short term, the impact is reduced. So rather than having that substantial upfront increase for the 2024 to 2026 period, that impact is reduced in the total combined bill, including the city portion and the TSSD portion, is now a 7% increase. But when we look beyond the 2026, you can see here the impact is pretty pronounced. So this is a more substantial impact when compared to scenario 1. So if we want to keep the 365-day target, let's phase that in. The potential impact is your long-term rate could be higher. We're showing that it does calculate to be a higher rate needed to get our target 365-day cash reserve.
Can we ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. As I kind of struggle with this, obviously these numbers you're giving us are costs per month, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is this the total sewer bill for people, or is this just the increase on top of what they're already paying? Because I haven't been quite...
I'm showing that 2024 represents what they would pay under your current rates. The 2026 is if you implemented the rate increases, what their bill would go up to.
So right now, in 2024, people pay an average of $53.32 a month. Correct?
No, it's not it's a reflection of a bill assuming you use 5 units of use. So it'll depend on use.
And do we know where that 5-unit assumption fits as a percentile of the city?
I do not.
Okay.
It's more to illustrate the percentage, though. So, yes, if we wanted to get an average bill, I'd have to survey all the customer accounts to get what the average bill is.
Yeah, we can get that.
I think 5 units represents typical indoor usage.
Yeah, 5 units would be 5,000 gallons. It's not a lot for a month of use.
So I guess I still don't know. I mean, we're putting these figures around, but the 53.32 for 24, 57 on this scenario, that's per month, right?
Correct.
And that's totally what people would pay per month.
That's if they're using 5 units of the studio, what they're classifying. They're just keeping everything equal. So, and we have to realize, okay, what you're doing is you're raising by that $3.75 an extra month. When you go, oh, we could do it by 2030, it would be average of $13.19 on serial 1. Money in 2024 is the same value as money in 2030. I mean, there is when they're paying 1984, there is a value where people have had increases in their wages.
Well, I'll have to think about this to wrap my mind around it a little bit more, because it just seems, when I look at this, that people are paying as much for sewer as they do for property tax in some cases. So I'm just wondering.
Okay.
Okay.
Am I going to keep going through the scenarios?
Keep going.
Okay. The second table here is showing that 2030 impact. So again, assuming 5 years of use, that long-term impact would be much more pronounced as we try to phase that in, as we discussed. Under scenario 3, here we're looking at an upfront increase, but we've reduced the cash reserve target, so we've pulled that down to the 270 days. So here we can see that target line is dropped. That allows us to have a reduced upfront increase when compared to scenario 1. So jumping back, instead of that 60% upfront increase in 2025, we can drop that down to 35%, followed by 20% and then 2% thereafter. This is still primarily a city rate adjustment, so we're still under this scenario calibrating the revenue generation to equalize that revenue relative to cost. Here, this shows the long-term impacts on the rate. So you go from $7.15 up to $12.54 by 2030 for the base rate. The usage rate would also go up by that same percentage. So here, again, comparing to scenario 1, obviously that's going to be much more reduced because we don't need that as big of an upfront increase because our cash reserve target has been dropped. But we're primarily affecting the city portion of the bill. You can see the TSSD bill, we're not changing. That results in an overall increase of about 11% when we compare a usage based on 5 years of use. So if we reduce that target amount, we'd be able to reduce the proposed rate increases. When we look out to 2030, here you can see the TSSD bill is impacted by that inflationary percentage at the tail end of the model. So that rate does start to go up, and you can see that portion of the bill starts sharing the load relative to our cost model. Overall increase under scenario 3, when we look at both the city portion and the TSSD portion combined, assuming 5 years use, for about a 20% increase through 2030.
It looks like the 2030 in scenario 3 is less than the 2030 in scenario 1. Why is that?
Because we're not in 360. The one is 365-day target.
Oh, that's the target. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, under scenario 4, here we're having the same reduced target, so the 270 days of cash on hand, but we're phasing it in. So under scenario 2, we were looking at about an 18.5% increase every year. We can shave off 5% of that every year by reducing our cash reserve target. So here we show that 13.5%. That results in us achieving still that target, that reduced target. Our rates do not have to go as high as that scenario, the previous scenario, scenario 2. And then when we look at the impact here, that impact is also reduced in the short term. So here you can see from 2024 to 2026, the combined bill goes up by a little over 5%. Again, because we've shifted the impact from those first 2 years and spread it out over the full planning horizon, so through 2030. So when we get to our 2030 impact, that's when the impact is more pronounced when compared to scenario 2. So we're, because we're pushing that rate increase to the tail end of the model, again, we're not benefiting from that compounding revenue generation, so it results in a slightly higher increase than what we showed if we do a larger upfront increase. Alrighty, under scenario 5, here the council discussed the option to move away from a revenue equalization relative to expense and just propose a rate increase that affects the combined revenue generation elements. So if we look at just a universal increase to all components of the rate and phase that over time, we're looking at about a 3.7% increase every year to achieve our lower target amount, that 270 days. So this really highlights where the majority of your revenue is coming from, that TSSD rate. So by having a smaller increase that affects both sides of the coin, you still achieve the same cash on hand target. So here we still have that 270-day target, but we're affecting both sides of your rate. So this shows that impact. Your city rate obviously would be lower than what, by 2030 would be lower than what the other scenarios proposed, because we pushed that revenue generation to the TSSD rate as well. So we're not just affecting the base rate or the city portion of your rate. So here we can see that impact would be equalized. So when we compare the city bill, the TSSD bill, and the combined, for a 2-year period, we're looking at that 7.5% increase, and it's equalized across the portions of the bill. When we look through the 2030 impact, it's about a 25% increase through 2030 relative to the total bill if we affect both of those rates. Alrighty. So here's a summary of those scenarios again. Our baseline scenario was do nothing. Under that approach, our days of cash was insufficient. Under scenario 1, we have a large upfront increase to the city rate portion only, and we're achieving that 365 days of cash target. That was the 60% increase followed by a 20% increase, but just to the city rate. Under scenario 2, it was an equalized increase that we phased in over time while still trying to achieve that 365 days. But again, that was just to the city rate. That was the 18.5% increase every year to the city rate portion. Under scenario 3, we shifted back to an upfront increase but reduced the days of cash target. That allowed us to pull the city rate portion increase from 60% down to that 35%, followed by a 20% increase. So reducing that target allows you to change the amount of revenue we need to generate. Under scenario 4, we're still looking at that city rate portion, the 270 days of cash, but we phased that in over time. That allowed us to drop to that 13.5% increase to the city rate portion rather than the 18.5% increase that we showed in scenario 2, while still trying to achieve that 270-day target. Under scenario 5, we shifted to a universal increase to all components of your rate, and that's where you saw the 3.5% increase each year to the both sides of your rates, the city portion and the TSSD portion, while achieving the 270 days of cash target by 2030. So here's a table that shows that at least the dollar impact. Again, this is for the base rate and assuming the customer uses about 5 units. So I tried to create a table that showed each of the scenarios just to give you an idea of the potential financial impacts as we look at the increase. Here's scenario 1. By 2026, that's where you see the bigger impact, right? Because that was front-loaded. And the other scenarios where you phase that in, that results in a lower short-term impact, which again may be beneficial from your perspective as you try to balance affordability and equity and those elements that are maybe not as not based on the financial sustainability of the model specifically. However, when you look to 2030, some of those phased approaches, you start to see the long-term cost of that. So here's scenario 1, which is that upfront increase. The long-term impact through 2030 was estimated about $14. But you can see as you phase that out, under scenario 2, the long-term impact is actually higher because, again, we're not benefiting from that compounding revenue generation. When we reduce the days of cash target, that obviously produces some savings, but it may not, again, generate a long-term rate reduction. So under scenario 3, that's where we had the upfront rate increase of 35% followed by 20%. That resulted in an impact of about $11. When compared to scenario 4, which was the phased-in approach, rather than the upfront increase at a lower cash target, you have a higher long-term impact than if you do an upfront increase. Under scenario 5, that's where we did an increase, a universal increase of both sides of the rate, the city portion and the TSSD portion. You can see the long-term impact is actually more than under scenario 3, which was an upfront increase with a reduced days of cash target. One scenario that I didn't present, this presentation was getting pretty scenario intensive, which there could be an iteration of scenario 5, which is rather than a phased universal increase, you could do a more of an upfront increase across the board, which would probably reduce that impact under scenario 5. So instead of doing that 3.5% increase every year to all components of your rate, you could front load that a little bit to mitigate the long-term impacts. But we were getting pretty intensive on our scenarios. But this is highlighting some of the trade-offs. Essentially, at its core, upfront increases typically result in a lower long-term rate, but it creates challenges relative to affordability in the short term because you're pushing rates up so quickly, versus a phased-in approach may be easier to absorb, but it may result in these longer-term higher rates that we're showing on this table. So those are some of the trade-offs.
I just had 2 or 3 questions, and this is for Dave and Fred. So I was just trying to, because I'm not an accountant, but we just talked about tonight how we exceed, in our revenues, exceed the 35% that we can keep in reserves. And this year, or last year, $1.8 million. Correct? Am I understanding right?
For the general fund only.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, the general fund only. I guess I don't understand why we need a cash
reserve or enough cash to pay our bills for 365 days when we've got these other reserves that we can dip into if we ran into problems. So why are we figuring it out for a full year ahead?
Yeah, the hard part with fund accounting is because we do have those reserves in separate funds, we don't necessarily want to subsidize our sewer fund with general fund dollars.
Right.
And so we want the fund to pay for itself. And in regard to having cash on hand, it's just your comfort level and the risk you're willing to take if there is unexpected expenditures during a year, things that break that we weren't anticipating or something like that. That's why we have that 365 days of cash, so that we know we can cover those types of expenses without having to borrow money or go out and bond.
Is there any legal or gap or best practices reason why we could not do the same thing that we have done with the cemetery fund and basically prepay large expenses out of the general fund and then pay back from the, in this case, the sewer fund?
Yeah, over time. Funds can loan money to each other and then pay it back with interest. So that is something that we're able to do if it's something the council wanted to do.
So okay, so let's go through a scenario. When does the city tap into the sewer fund? Is it to go and do bigger projects? I mean, because we have a capital project for sewer projects. So when we're saying, what's the difference between 365 and 270? What projects in the last 5 years has the city ever said, I need to now dip into the sewer fund to do things? Have you seen anything?
So as far as sewer fund capital, that's actually all contained within the sewer fund. So the separate capital accounts we have are just for roads, buildings, and parks. Sewer fund projects are all paid for out of that sewer fund. As far as projects that have required us to dip into some of that cash on hand, I don't have the background to be able to give you specifics. If we hadn't had to, that's a good thing. We don't want to have to, but it's kind of an insurance thing. You want to make sure you have what you need in case something happens.
Okay, I guess I'm just, if we're budgeting for a big sewer project, that's not in our, I understand it's in the sewer fund, but that's not on our cash on hand, right?
It would affect our cash on hand, definitely. That's something that in the model is taken into account. Fred has a list of all of our anticipated upcoming projects, and that's why we know we're going to need an increase to the rates to be able to cover those projects and operational costs.
That's why in 2028 we drop down as we're spending money on a project.
Right, exactly. Yep, and then so these are just the proposed rates that would keep that cash on hand at a level that you're comfortable with, whether that's 270 or 365. 365 is kind of a best practice, but if you're comfortable with a lower number, we can do that as well.
Any input, council, on how to move forward?
Do you have any idea what other cities have as reserve, just average, just Lehigh, American Fork, Cedar Hills, Alpine?
I don't know where they're at. I can survey them and see if I can get that information. My friend might have a better idea because he does these studies for multiple cities. But from my perspective, I think most cities would be shooting for the 365 days. Whether they're at that or not, I don't know. But Fred may have some more insight on that one.
Yeah, I think I heard the question and comments, but relative to what other cities establish relative to a cash reserve policy, it will vary. So some entities will let it fall as low as 150 days. Others will shoot for the 365, and there are several factors that influence what target you're comfortable with. So in addition to capital investment, so your cash reserve will help absorb unknown capital needs, emergency repair and replacement projects that we have not accounted for in the model. So if something were to happen in the future where you needed emergency dollars, you would have that without having to change rates immediately, or allow you to address those emergency needs or unknowns while working through a new rate policy. So it gives you that flexibility to do that. Other considerations are actually from an operational standpoint. So
perfect example is you as a city. You had huge increases to your operational budget relative to an outside entity, for which you have no control over. That cash reserve, if you have 365 days or 270 days, or whatever policy you ultimately adopt, that allows you to absorb substantial changes in your operational costs without having to immediately change rates, right? You can actually, by having that reserve, you can absorb those operational costs while working through a new rate policy and making changes, reviewing data, which is what we did as part of this process. So we were able to, because you had some cash reserve, you're able to absorb those increases while working through all the data, having discussions with TSSD, funding your capital project lists, and going through a rate policy review. So that's another reason why you have cash reserves, is to be able to do that, to have the flexibility to absorb changes, substantial operational changes, and make informed decisions on how to move forward with those changes in mind. Then the other reason you adopt a cash reserve policy is in the event that you need to borrow money. Lenders, banks, whether it's through a private placement or a public offering, will look at your policies, and if you have higher cash reserves, your cost to borrow will be reduced. So they'll look at you as a more secure, essentially a more secure investment, and your cost to borrow will be reduced as a result of that. So all of those factors influence what an entity is comfortable with or what targets they shoot for relative to that cash reserve. Those entities that look for a 365-day target are trying to hedge against all of that uncertainty and ensure that they are, the enterprise fund is independent and self-sufficient. Those that shoot for a lower policy may not see some of those risk factors and are comfortable with having less cash on hand. And so they'll adopt a lower policy. And some will go as low as that 150 days as a target amount, because those risk factors are just really not a concern for them.
I really appreciate this discussion and all this research that's been done. I think one factor that we kind of underestimate is, though, what does it do to individual families and citizens? Because we have a fair amount of uncertainty right now. We know our garbage rates have to go up because the tipping fees, in a week from now, we're going to pass increased tipping fees. That may increase our costs in the city by $20,000 a year. We just voted to split the Alpine School District. We really don't know how much that's going to cost us. And so I would lean towards more of a phased approach and maybe not keep such high cash reserves, just to kind of cushion it for the citizens, because these are kind of some big increases, I think, for people that are on limited incomes. And right now there's still quite a bit of uncertainty in the economy. Hopefully things improve with new administration and stuff, but we don't know. So I kind of lean towards a phased-in approach.
Yeah, I appreciate the work you put into this. I knew you by reputation before, only reputation, and now I know why you have that reputation. This is incredibly effective as far as communicating to us what our options are. And I agree with Scott. I came to this meeting today not feeling like we wanted to phase it in, not feeling like we wanted to lower our reserve. But when I really look at the impact, there is an impact where we're going to ultimately pay a little more if we phase it in. But if we do options 3 or 5, those scenarios, those seem manageable to me, and they seem better than 1. And I came in thinking I was going to support scenario 1, hell or high water, and I really have changed my mind, and I agree with Scott.
Rob, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, 2 questions. The first one, am I correctly understanding this, that the numbers that are put here
are in order to get us very near the target level in 2030. Okay, and so that suggests to me that if we go with a phased approach, it means we're going to be growing relatively quickly above that target level after 2030. Because the fee in 2030 is higher than it is with the upfront. Would that be accurate?
Fred can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the 2030 on most of the graphs is shown as when we do hit that days of cash on hand. But I don't think that the idea was to get there by 2030. I think we want to be there as consistently as possible between now and then. And just with the way the model worked out and the expenses that we have, you can see the ups and downs, and that by 2030 we were around the target, but sometimes we were higher, sometimes we were lower.
But if we take one of those phased approaches, we would expect the fund balance to grow above the target after 2030.
Well, not necessarily. The elements that would affect that is if you continue to do an inflationary increase beyond 2030, what is the nature of your capital plan after 2030? So do you need to invest more or less in capital infrastructure beyond 2030? And what is the impact from TSSD? So,
but if in 2030, with a phased approach, the average person is paying $450 a month more than they are with an upfront approach, then all else is equal.
Yes.
And those capital expenses should be the same regardless of which of those approaches we take. That we would expect the phased approach to grow us above that target, at least more so than the upfront approach. Would that be fair?
Yes, it could.
Other question is just with regard to the cash on hand. Is there some level that we need to maintain just for cash management in the account? Do we tend to spend early in the fiscal year, but we actually get the cash in spread evenly across the fiscal year?
Yeah, just with the nature of what a lot of construction projects are, we would probably spend a little bit heavier in the first part of the fiscal year with the revenue coming in pretty much consistently throughout the entire year.
Do you have any feel at all for what that level might be? That we need to maintain, setting everything else aside just for cash management in the fund? Or do we could throw a dart at a board and give me a number, but that's all it's going to be?
Yeah, honestly, I think that's my
okay.
Council, is there any direction to kind of give? Is there a certain scenario that you want? I think we have to decide. Are you okay with 270? I heard from Scott and from Ron. They appear to be okay at 270. Do others appear there, or is there concern going? I mean, looking at the first two scenarios of 365. The last three scenarios of 270. What is there a feeling, so we can kind of narrow down and give the direction? Is 270 seem to be in what other councils thinking, or are you thinking more keeping 365?
I'm fine with 270. I like scenario 3.
Okay. Yeah, at least in the short term, I'm good with 270.
Okay, so that's now focused. So now you have 3, 4, and 5. Out of those, Kim, you mentioned 3. Others, any other films between 3, 4, and 5?
I just want to point out that on the slide I'm showing you, scenario 3 is the upfront increase to the city portion of the rate. So we have the 35% and the 20%. Scenario 4 and 5 are the phased-in approaches, with 5 being the phased-in approach with a universal increase across the rate as a whole, not a city portion versus TSSD portion. Scenario 3 is the more upfront increased approach.
You're going to have cash coming in faster.
Which is the reason you end up with a net less in the combined.
Yes.
So I like scenario 3 for that reason, but my first choice is 5. although 3 is a very close second.
Okay, others?
I like 5 the best, but 3, I'm just like Ron on this.
Okay, other council members? Brittany and Doug?
3 and 5 were the 2 that I was thinking about.
In which order?
I was thinking 3 first.
I'm changing it to 1.
1?
I'm just kidding.
I would agree with Brittany that 3 would be the top for me over 5. I like getting it more in balance so that the TSSD part is really spent for the TSSD portion.
Okay, so council, am I hearing that 3 is kind of where everyone will be?
Yeah, I'm willing to go 3, yeah.
I just don't like that upfront increase this year. I think it should be more phased, so I'm going to lean towards 5.
So 5 is 402 versus 3 is 592 a month.
Yeah, my first choice was 5, but I'm willing to do 3 if, you know, but I'm with Scott.
Okay, but Brittany, you were 3 first?
I was, but do we have to choose 1 tonight? Because I feel like
Well,
that's like
what
a
do you
lot.
need for us,
of
Fran?
Yeah, we would like some direction if you can come to a consensus on 1, just because we'd like to prepare a resolution to come before you in the next meeting in December to adopt the new rates. We could write 2 resolutions and let you choose between the 2 if it's really a toss-up between the 2. I just wanted to quickly, just as a drive the point home with scenario 3 and why we want to do the all to the city rate portion. And I know you all have heard this, but just to remind those that are listening as well, we currently, the way our rates were structured for whatever reason, the TSSD portion of our rate is subsidizing the costs of our city infrastructure maintenance and operational costs. And so this is an effort to right-size that, or at least begin the process of right-sizing that, so that the city portion pays for the city infrastructure costs, the TSSD portion pays for just the TSSD charge. This would get us more in that direction. Scenario 5 we would just be kicking that same issue down the road where we don't care and we don't.
Am I correct in thinking this is the first time that we've seen this presentation with these scenarios, correct?
Yeah, in the work session, we just had scenario 1.
So it feels like for a non-finance person, it just feels like to narrow it down and choose 1 tonight at 10 o'clock. That's hard for me. Maybe somebody else's brain works better than
So what
mine.
you're recommending is, Brittany, you're saying bring 3 and 5 back as resolutions so you can choose.
Yeah, and if you need a choice, then at least give us like a couple weeks to look at it and think about it and then get back to you, but I'm not prepared to choose 1 tonight.
Sure, I think we got good direction, and we'll send you a copy of this presentation that you can review over the next couple of weeks. We'll prepare both options for the December 3rd meeting and let you choose one of those.
Sounds great. Okay, now let's move on to our communication items. We have communication item number 7A, which is the Alpine Highway fence. That's Jay.
All right, here's part of the evening you've all been waiting for.
I'm tired of this.
Can we not talk about
I move that we extend the meeting from 10 to 10:10.
I'll second.
Okay, let's move fast. Alpine
Okay.
fence.
Alpine Highway Fence. The Alpine Highway Fence grant is live. We've received a few applications already. We're bringing this to you for a couple of items. First, we'll be sending a letter to all eligible residents, letting them know some of the particulars of the program, especially that it is a first-come, first-served basis program with a annual pot of $80,000. Once that application is gone, applicants will have to wait until the next year's tranche. Some residents who have applied already have asked for a waiver of the $25 fence permit fee, application fee. Staff can't waive that, that's council's prerogative, so we wanted to get some direction on that.
So is that the total cost for the fence fee?
For the fence permit fee is $25.
$25.
Council, one of the reasons they're saying is that if they're doing this and the city's doing the grant, is this something to be reasonable to not have to pay?
Do they have to pay to apply for the grant?
What?
Do they have to pay a fee to apply for the grant? Like you have to pay to apply to do like the,
There is management, city management, we don't have a fee at this time for a grant.
you have to pay a fee if you want to apply for a traffic mitigation thing. Right?
Well, I understand what you're saying, but we're basically charging the fee to apply for the grant.
Let's come back, guys. The $25 fence fee, yes or no?
No,
Meaning not to charge the 25,
not to waive it.
not to waive it. Others?
I would agree.
I would waive it. I would waive it.
Okay. Brittany, what do you say?
I would not waive it.
Okay, so, understanding I'm not waiving, I have Brittany not waiving, Scott waiving, I have Doug not waiving, Kim not waiving, Ron waiving.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we now, I just want to make sure that's what I understood that, so, okay, anything else you need from us, Jay?
Just to let you know some of the things going on with the program as well. The city sprinkler system is being torn up during the fence replacement work. We expected that. All sprinklers in the affected area worked as when we depressurized the system a few weeks ago. We will need to ensure that our system is properly repaired before we release funds, which we will not be able to do until the system is recharged in the late spring of 2025. We can release some or none of the money now, which would you prefer?
I would like to hold back a reasonable amount that we think would be the maximum we would have to pay for repair and release the rest of it. It's like a bond. You put in a fire hydrant, you've got to have a bond there for the city for 2 years to make sure that the road holds up, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same thing. We give them their money, to hold their money until spring doesn't seem right, but to hold back the amount that we might need at some maximum. I don't know what that number is.
I agree with Ron. Yeah, I agree with Ron, and just you guys can determine how much it'll cost to repair this.
Right.
Oh, I agree with Ron and Kim.
Okay.
So an amount to be determined by staff based on what is reasonable.
You believe it's a reasonable amount of coming back for landscape?
But I'd be real reasonable.
You know me, Scott, I'm reasonable.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's all I have.
Plus 10%, just like us in our stuff.
That's all I have for this particular item.
Okay, well, now we're going to go on to election update. I believe that's Stephanie, is that correct? Yeah. And I think it will be Rob too, so it'll be Rob and Stephanie kind of doing that.
We're going to tag team this. I'm going to give you some stats to begin with. Brooklyn, do you mind advancing that slide? So our grand totals here. Total Highlands registered voters was 14,639, which is up about 2,000 from our last presidential election. The grand results, this is amazing. The total Highland City ballots that were counted this time, 11,087, which was a whopping 76% turnout.
Wow.
That's
Now, at first, I did not believe that, but I double-checked.
Did you verify it?
Well, I feel more comfortable with this number after updating my numbers on Prop 11. So, which I'll show you that in just a minute.
How much is
Way to
our
go.
population increase since the election 4 years ago, do you know?
I don't know.
We don't know. Keep going.
Okay, all right, we're gonna go fast. So fast pass voters, the number of voters that actually came into City Hall and voted, we did have quite a few people. It was amazing. It was actually inspiring to see so many people come in and want to vote. But I was actually shocked that this number wasn't higher than what it was, but it was 1,337. I believe there were actually others that came in who just dropped their ballots inside here that were not maybe counted in this number. But the fast cast voters were 217. That's where you come in, you have your ballot all filled out, you sign an iPad, they verify you with your ID, and then you sign the iPad right there so that your ID is associated with your signature right there. What that does is it avoids any curing process with verifying your signature. So 217 people opted for that option that day. The ballot on demand, that's when people came in and needed to have a ballot printed for them. We had 1,120 people. So stats on that was pretty fun.
Did you have any printing issues?
We did have some printing issues that day. We ran out of the magenta ink. So we did have some printing issues, but I really can't say enough about our fabulous poll workers that were here. I was in and out all day, and they really improvised, and we started out with 2 printers that were functioning, and they just adjusted, and we were able to print out almost every single ballot that they needed to have that day.
Now, what was the last person walking out the door vote on that? What do you figure the last time?
About 9:20.
We had voters here till 9:20 p.m.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, very fascinating. It was a fun day to watch all of that happening, and it was wonderful. Anyway, so let me give you a little bit of a background on this too. I know that the press did a lot of really negative press on the ink and the ballots and the printing, but I have to tell you that as I was experiencing this day with our residents and with residents from other cities, I personally met 3 individuals who had just been made resident or received their citizenship, and they were here to vote for the first time, which was very exciting. I think one of them was actually John's daughter-in-law, which was very exciting.
Wow.
So, and then we had several 18-year-olds who came in to vote for the very first time, and they were thrilled to be here. So we get a lot of bad press, but really there's some really wonderful things that happen on election day that I think need to be mentioned. So, all right, who wants to hear about Prop 11? All right.
Wait, I just have to say, that means 12% of people voted in person. A lot more than last time. That's awesome.
Oh, yes. I think that the numbers that voted in person shocked us all. So, yeah.
So obviously we want to have that option always available.
I think that a lot of residents appreciate having that option. I think there's a lot that appreciate the ease of being able to do it the other way and just drop them in the ballot drop boxes or in the mail. But there are some definitely that really want to come in and vote in person, and let's great. Let's give them that option.
Can I ask one quick question before we go on Prop 11, because I know we're running out of time. But so these are people who voted on election day.
Correct.
Do you have any idea how many ballots were dropped off in our box out here?
Not a
clue.
clue.
No clue. There's no way to track that.
No, I mean I can tell you the Highland City numbers, but we're getting people from all over Utah County who drop in our box.
Right there. Okay.
So.
And it was happening weeks before. I mean, if you were just sitting here in the city offices, you're just seeing car after car.
Yes. It was like a parade going by. It was really fun. Okay, Prop 11. Here are these are the results as of 10:24 this morning. You can see that Alpine, Cedar Hills, Draper, Highland, and Lehigh all voted stronger yes than they did no. American Fork was the only city that voted more no than they did yes. You can see the percentages there. They were, I mean, you're looking at 60-40 splits, roughly, for most of the cities on that. So I thought that was
Do you have I think Prop 11, you know, when this shows what the total? I think Prop 11 passed at about 57.5% or somewhere around 57.
Yeah, I should have included that down on here. I don't have that with me right now. But yes, it did pass. And it was, I think if we added up, I'm not going to try and do math here. Sorry.
Okay. So, since American Fork didn't vote for it, can we vote them off the island?
I asked that question, yeah.
And I don't think we want to have our good partner in the American Fork. We'd like to have a partner district.
Yeah.
I think so too.
That's true. So.
Okay, and I'll turn the time over to Rob. I'm sure you have questions.
Rob sent us the email, but
it's going to move forward.
Yep, I sent you an email earlier today. Sorry I didn't get out earlier. It's just the next steps. The most important thing to realize is within 30 days of the creation of the district, which I think people are now interpreting as the date the vote happened, rather than the date of canvassing. So that means the 30-day window is ending December 5th. The county has to submit the documents to the state, to the Lieutenant Governor's office to create the school district, and the interlocal participant cities have to register the new school district, meaning you have to give it a name. So that has to happen by December 5th.
The cities give it a name.
The cities...
Just a placeholder name.
You can give a placeholder name, the district can change it later, but you have to, the district has to be created within 30 days after creation.
You scared me for a
Within
minute.
60 days, so by January 6th, the current school board is supposed to create an inventory of all of the assets and liabilities and submit that to the state. And by April 1st, the county commission is supposed to redistrict everything by creating the districts for each board member for the 3 new school districts that will be created. So that beginning June through the municipal, it'll follow the municipal election cycle. So candidate declaration June, primary in August, and then election in November for new board members. And there's a 2-year process essentially of them working with the existing school board and new school board and the state to align and distribute the assets and liability between all of the new school districts. Just for you to be aware, there's been discussion, I haven't seen anything formal, of potential state legislative changes to this process that might make the state auditor more involved in kind of administering the asset and liability division. That's kind of an outside neutral, make sure the money is just handled appropriately. And it may be that the cities are a little more involved because we don't have a new school board until next January. That it might be that there be some kind of staff level board created just to help start administering some of this transition for the next year. We'll see what comes up in the legislative session. So next step is we have to go register the school in some fashion, give it a name, and then the county will be redistricting.
So how do we need to work with the other cities to come up with a name?
We need to talk with the other cities, and there won't need to be a council formal action. We just need a name that someone then goes registers with the state.
Do we need a motion on Cougar Cove District?
Mr. Mayor, I move to extend the meeting into 10:20.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nay. Why did you say Brittany?
You said what?
Okay, hold it. Brittany?
No.
Scott?
No.
Doug?
Yes.
Kim? No. Why did you say yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, works. Okay, let's just keep going. The one
Sorry,
I was
did
asking
someone
them
second that
is
motion?
they did talk about the current board members as part of this bill. They might extend their term by 6 months. There's not an election to happen at that time. Okay, let's move on to our next discussion item, which is going to be the schedule, the meeting schedule.
And this will be so fast, Brooklyn, do you mind advancing the screen one more time? Thank you. All right, these are the proposed dates for our meetings for 2025. This is following our standard schedule of the first and third Tuesdays of every month, with the exceptions being in April, where we will only have one meeting due to spring break. And then, of course, we only have one meeting in November and December. The November meeting is later due to Election Day and Veterans Day, I believe.
Okay.
So,
Oh, that's why. I
That's
remember
why.
why it wasn't the same like we did today.
yes, elections and Veterans
It was
Day.
the 18th.
And she emailed this all out, I think. All
Yeah, I went
Yes.
through it. It was great.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's great. We'll bring that back for your further consideration at our next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
We had Jay on this citizen survey.
Yeah, so we recently completed our citizen survey that ran through the month of October, ending when we collected the utility bills on Monday, November 4th. So far, we've collected 1,554 responses, with only a few left to enter in manually. So we intend to have some analysis and results for you at the December meeting.
Okay. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Just want to highlight, we do have a general plan open house that didn't make it on this list. Next Wednesday evening, beginning at 5:30 here. We've already had one public open house. We're having our second one regarding the general plan. There'll be kind of breakout groups discussing different specific issues and different options of how to handle those different issues in the city. So we've invited planning commission, council, we're trying to invite everyone to come to that. So that's
a week from tomorrow.
On the
week from
20th.
tomorrow.
Okay, so on November 20th, we have a work session here, general plan, 5:30.
It's not a council work session, so you don't have to come, but if you are available, this would be a great time to get input on the general plan as it's being kind of drafted.
Okay, next meeting, we actually have the Christmas light ceremony, so did not make it on the agenda. Christmas light lighting ceremony is going to be on November 25th, which is Monday. I have done 6 o'clock. Am I thinking correct? Is it 5 or 6? Is it 6?
6 to 8.
Huh?
6 to 8.
6 to 8. Now, on that, we need to be aware they are doing a little bit more of a performance program, and it's going to be over at the Daughters of Utah Pioneer. I have a good likelihood, I've heard that Santa might be appearing and actually at the Daughters of Utah Pioneer camp. So, and that will be our Christmas lighting. I think they're going to have a little bit more of a singing thing. I mean, there's going to be a little bit more of a thing. As we go in, other than that, then we have our next city council meeting on December the 3rd. Remember, our Christmas party is December 17th. Yep. So, okay. With that, we had a motion that's up there. We do have a closed session.
I move that the City Council recess the regular City Council meeting to convene in a closed meeting in the executive conference room to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual and the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Brittany, second by Ron. I think we're supposed to do a roll call to go in. So Ron?
Yes.
Brittany. I'm sorry, Kim.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And now?
Yes.
Okay, we are now in closed session.